When my body was about to give out under the Pope's pressure, he suddenly pulled it back. I could tell he was struggling with what to make of me. He asked me what other secrets I was hiding. He knew my talent for seeing attributes shouldn't have let me grow this fast. So I made a choice. I told him a half-truth. I said my attribute points increase once a week, not once a year. That was enough to shock him. He quickly did the math. 52 points a year, at minimum an S-rank talent. He got excited, realizing that given enough time, I could become unstoppable. Of course, the real truth is that I gain a point every single day, not every week. If he knew that, he'd realize I could catch up to S-rank holders in less than a year. But I kept that to myself. He didn't fully believe me. Half of him thought I was making it up to avoid punishment, or that maybe I'd found some treasure boosting my growth. But my progress was too fast to ignore, so he couldn't dismiss it either. Eventually, he told me he'd keep my talent secret. We both understood why. If word got out, even the weakened version I described, every major power on the continent would come after the church. Because my talent could also add to lifespan, and with weekly gains, even one lucky lifespan point would mean 52 more chances, potentially creating an infinite loop. I'd become an ever-growing, immortal monster. Nobody would allow that to exist. But if my talent was real, the church could become the continent's permanent, unshakable ruler. So the Pope made his decision. No special treatment on the surface, but secret support behind the scenes. We both knew this was the best arrangement. He couldn't ignore me. If he neglected me and I grew resentful later, that would be a disaster. And killing me would be foolish when I could change the church's destiny forever. The Pope told me to go ahead with my earlier plan. He said he'd arrange competitions for me to earn training resources. As long as I kept performing well, the supplies would come. It was a solid deal. I could tell he genuinely wanted to raise me up, maybe even have me take over his position someday. Meanwhile, Sacred Heart would just be my stepping stone. Our positions had completely flipped. When I left the Pope's hall, I was covered in blood. Not mine, but it looked terrifying. The guards outside assumed I'd been brutally punished and let me pass without a word. I headed home. When Milia opened the door and saw me, she burst into tears and threw herself into my arms. I patted her back and told her I was fine, that the blood wasn't mine. She didn't calm down until after I showered and she could see for herself there wasn't a single wound on me. Then I went straight to the Blacksmith Guild to continue my training. My routine wasn't going to change over something like this. If anything, the Pope's involvement would only speed up my growth. My impression of him was actually pretty good right now. Still, I couldn't help wondering, was he too easy to deal with? I'd prepared so many backup plans and didn't need any of them. Shouldn't someone in his position be more like a final boss? So I kept my guard up. No matter how fair or kind he seemed, I could never fully trust anyone. Years of experience taught me that, and someone as powerful as the Pope was no exception. At the guild, the blacksmiths were shocked to see me back in one piece. They started whispering, trying to figure out who was backing me. Injuring the Saintess and walking away unpunished was supposed to be impossible. But when I approached, they all went quiet, as if they'd agreed beforehand not to bring it up. Even Cora acted like nothing had happened. She was starting to realize my situation was more complicated than she'd thought. Only Sophia came running over, asking if I was okay. I nodded and told her I was fine. But right then, something clicked. When the Pope mentioned he'd find ways to get resources to me, I instantly thought of Sophia. She was the Pope's person, planted beside me from the start. So much for the beautiful girl randomly striking up a friendship. It was all arranged. I wasn't going to expose her, though. I could use her too, feeding the Pope some false information through her. My biggest problem right now was that I was growing way too fast, far beyond what any normal genius should manage. So going forward, I planned to only show part of my abilities. If the truth came out, it would make a lot of people want me dead. In fact, some already did. I brushed off Sophia's concerns and went back to forging. Meanwhile, on the other side of things, Sacred Heart had woken up in her room with the Pope sitting by her bed, and from what I heard, she was furious, feeling like she'd been through this humiliating scene before. After the Pope left my situation settled, he went to deal with Sacred Heart. From what I gathered, it didn't go well for her. She tried her usual trick, acting like the victim, screaming that I was a scoundrel who ambushed her, demanding the Pope kill me. But this time the Pope wasn't having it. He was furious. He gave her one final warning: stop causing trouble or lose the Saintess title. If she wanted revenge on me, she had to beat me in an official competition, no dirty tricks. He told her to have some pride. And if he heard about her bullying people again, he'd cripple her himself. She couldn't believe it. In her mind, S-rank talents like her should be pampered and worshipped. She was furious that the Pope would side with a nobody over her. The moment he raised his voice, all the years of him treating her like a daughter meant nothing. She decided he was trash who didn't deserve to be Pope. She thought she hid her hatred, but the Pope saw everything. He was deeply disappointed. This was her last chance, and she blew it. He realized that if he let her inherit the church, she'd destroy it. And now he had me, someone he saw as a perfect successor. After the Pope left, Sacred Heart trashed her room and whipped her servants, screaming in rage. But at least she'd stay quiet for a while. 19 days passed. Tomorrow was the blacksmith tournament. During those 19 days, my stats jumped massively. I gained 14 strength, 7 agility, 9 constitution, and 5 spirit. My total stats were now strength 75, agility 58, constitution 63, spirit 52. I'd caught up to S-rank growth speed. The only difference was I didn't have their explosive combat talents. My star forging hammer technique reached level 2, proficient rank. I could now forge magic-grade equipment with 7 refinements, though hero grade was still beyond me. Hero grade needs at least 6 ores fused together, including 2 ultra-high quality attribute ores, with a minimum of 4 refinements to fully merge. The difficulty gap was enormous. The night before the tournament, I didn't rest. Unlike normal blacksmiths who use 4 ores for magic-grade equipment, I was using 5. It made things harder but produced better quality weapons and pushed my skills further. Some people tried to sabotage me before the competition, tampering with my materials, maybe slipping something into my food. But I was cautious. I slept at the blacksmith guild that night instead of going home. The guild master and vice master both stayed at the guild to watch over things, so nobody could make a move. The guild master personally guarded my forging materials. Then right before bed, I got a notification, 1 lucky point added to my stats. Getting a luck boost right before the tournament, that was exactly what I needed. Maybe tomorrow's surprises would be a little fewer. The next day arrived, the annual blacksmith tournament. The competition was split into 3 tiers: bronze for smiths aged 20 and under, gold for 21 to 30, and diamond for those above 30. I was in bronze, but my plan was to finish in the top 3, collect my prizes, and then enter the gold bracket too. My forging level was already top tier among advanced blacksmiths, which would put me at least upper middle in gold. Diamond was out of the question though. The gap was too big, and I wasn't even qualified. I could still watch and learn from the masters. When I showed up at the venue, I drew a lot of attention. Normally only blacksmiths attend these events, but today people from other guilds had come too, most of them staring at me. The news from recent days had made me famous across the entire church. And the fact that the Pope barely punished me after I injured the Saintess, then quickly sealed the information, that convinced the important figures that I might become a key person in the church's future. They were here to get a look at me and make a good impression early. Among them were the Alchemist Guild's master and vice master. The guild master was hoping I'd embarrass myself during the competition. He wanted me to be all hype and no substance. The vice master had different plans entirely. He was thinking about leaving the Alchemist Guild to start his own, one that would teach alchemy to ordinary people. He wanted to see my performance first. If I was impressive enough, he'd leave immediately. He refused to watch the blacksmith profession surpass alchemy. Our guild master Kono spotted the Alchemist Guild master and couldn't resist poking at him, asking why he had time to come watch a blacksmith competition. The alchemist fired back with a veiled threat about something happening to me. But Kono wasn't worried anymore. My fame had become its own protection. The Pope knew about me. Powerful people wanted to recruit me. Anyone who tried to kill me would face retaliation from all the factions trying to pull me to their side. Being in the spotlight meant being watched by everyone. And yes, some wanted me dead. But others wanted me on their team, and they'd punish anyone who touched me. It was a surprisingly effective shield. The bronze bracket kicked off. The rules were straightforward. Forge your best weapon in 8 hours using materials provided by the guild. We could use our own furnaces and hammers. Those counted as part of our skill. Some approved drugs were also allowed. They gave each of us 2 ore pieces, meaning 2 chances to forge. The top 100 out of 4,000 contestants would advance. A brutal 40-to-1 elimination rate. The huge turnout was because smiths from other cities had come to compete too, not just those from Holy Light City. I grabbed my materials and started forging without hesitation. When I pulled out my forging furnace and hammer, people noticed right away. Every blacksmith in the room could tell these were quality tools. I'd earned a lot of points from all my recent forging, around 50,000 saved up, though I should have had more. The guild pays on consignment, so some of my weapons hadn't sold yet. The moment the exam started, I fired up the star-picking furnace and tossed both pieces in at once. While other contestants were still heating their materials, a heavy hammering sound echoed through the hall. Mine. People turned to stare, probably thinking something like, I just lit my fire, and this guy is already forging. Several people were watching me closely. Cora, Sophia, Drew, and Kazan. Kazan in particular looked at me with resentment. Before I showed up, he was the star, the youngest to break through to advanced blacksmith at just 18, matching the vice master's growth rate. He was supposed to be the genius everyone talked about. Then I came along and took all that attention. He even noticed I was using the vice master's old furnace, the one promised to whoever proved worthy. He'd assumed it would be his. I could practically feel his bitterness. I worked fast, removed impurities, fused the two ores together, and started refining. I had 8 hours, so I figured I might as well put on a show. The other smiths couldn't believe the gap. They hadn't even started hammering yet, and I was nearly done and still pushing for more. Drew looked serious for a moment, then turned away and focused on his own work. Smart move. I completed 6 refinements before the blank cooled, then reheated it in the furnace. For ordinary grade, or 6 wasn't nearly enough for me. I didn't feel any difficulty at all. Up on the stage, Kono and the other leaders just watched. I'd used both ores at once, leaving myself zero room for error. But nobody in that room believed I'd fail, and I wasn't about to disappoint them. Every strike of my hammer was torture for the other contestants. It was like hearing someone flipping pages in an exam hall. Each bang meant I was pulling further ahead. I wasn't just hammering or at that point. I was hammering their pride. 2 hours in, I finished with 9 refinements. That got the big shots excited. They knew what 9 refinements in that time frame meant. My talent was real. The Alchemist Guild Master looked disappointed. He'd been hoping I'd flop. 9 wasn't my limit. It was the material's limit. Ordinary or simply couldn't handle a 10th refinement without falling apart. Then I shaped the blade, polished it, and did the water quenching. Ordinary weapons carry no attributes, so no forging liquid was needed. I assembled the handle and placed the finished sword on the display stand. The examiner walked over and studied it. A straight, slender blade with a faint cold gleam. He couldn't find a single flaw. When he picked it up, I could see the surprise on his face. The feel in his hand impressed him the same way top-tier master-forged weapons did, maybe even better. A lot of smiths overlook how a weapon feels to hold, but it matters enormously. He swung it a couple of times. Smooth and balanced, not too light, not too heavy. Then came the sharpness test, cutting through special bark rope that's extremely tough, the kind ordinary blades struggle with. The examiner rushed over to the rope for the sharpness test. He swung my sword down, and the tough bark rope was sliced clean through in one cut, a perfectly smooth edge. He held the blade up and stared at it, clearly amazed. I could tell he wanted to buy it on the spot. Then came the strength test. Hit an iron bar 10 times without the sword breaking. The examiner looked a little pained. He didn't want to damage such a fine weapon on a chunk of iron. But rules are rules. He swung once. The iron bar, 5 centimeters thick, was cut straight through. So there was good news and bad news for the other contestants. The good news, something broke during the strength test. The bad news, it was the iron bar, not my sword. I could see people's composure crumbling around the room. This was supposed to be an ordinary grade weapon made from basic ore. But under my hands, it had surpassed ordinary grade entirely. It was stronger than some fine quality weapons, just without any attribute bonuses. The examiner didn't even bother with the remaining 9 strikes. His testing tool was destroyed. He announced I'd passed, barely containing his excitement. After that I headed to the rest area and watched the other contestants for a while, but I quickly lost interest. Their techniques were rough. Most just swung their hammers without carefully observing the or controlling their force. Only a handful showed decent skill, and even they were well below my level. This bronze bracket was like a children's league for me. Still, the first place prize was an extraordinary flame, even if it was the lowest tier. I was curious what it would feel like to use one. From what I'd read, mastering an extraordinary flame meant no more fuel needed for forging, plus massive boosts to efficiency, success rate, and weapon strength. I glanced toward the guild leaders and noticed that the guild master, vice master, and a bunch of other important people were all staring at me. At their level, they could read skill across professions, and everyone could see how strong my technique was. The examiner's face when he'd held my sword. That kind of joy couldn't be faked. My weapons were already selling at 10 to 20% above other weapons of the same grade, and people gladly paid it. The feel in the hand was part of it, but also the appearance. My sense of design was far ahead of other smiths my age. Even the simplest sword, I'd adjust the proportions and add small details that made it look a tier above everything beside it. For just a slight markup, buyers got something that looked and felt dramatically better. Even the examiner was now probably planning to buy one of my swords, not to fight with, just to collect. With nothing else to do, I pulled out a book and started reading. Thanks to my high-spirit stat, I could memorize things in a single read. That feeling of absorbing knowledge instantly and seeing through problems at a glance, it was incredible. Meanwhile, Kazan was on his fourth refinement, determined to match my 9. He glanced my way, probably expecting some dramatic moment where our eyes would meet across the arena. But the reality was, I wasn't even looking at the arena. I was reading my book, completely unbothered. Apparently, that set Kazan off. He got so angry that when he pulled out his heated blank and swung his hammer down, he hit way too hard. The ore shattered into pieces. His hammer head was too small to cover the whole blank, so when he slammed down with full force, the edges flew everywhere. He just stood there, frozen. Everyone glanced over, including the guild leaders, but then went back to their own business. Nobody laughed. They just didn't care. Drew was especially unimpressed. He'd once considered Kazan a rival, but after seeing this, not anymore. The thing is, Kazan could have recovered. If he'd gathered the fragments and forged something decent, his skill was enough to make the top 100 even with a flawed product. But he spent the entire 8 hours stuck in his own head, doubting himself, and never submitted anything. I'd been a little curious about him at first, but after watching him fall apart over one mistake, I shook my head. Too fragile. And of course, he saw me do it. Something in him broke further. He couldn't even get my acknowledgement. Vice Master Gugong noticed and apparently planned to give him some counseling later. The examiner announced the results. 2,465 contestants passed the first round. Not surprising. It was just ordinary weapons with 2 chances. Guildmaster Kono frowned at that number, though. Every contestant here had at least a beginner blacksmith certification, yet so many still failed. Forging isn't like alchemy. If you're serious, you should pass. Then came the second round collision test. They paired swords against each other. The weaker one gets eliminated. My sword went first, matched against a plain-looking blade. The moment they clashed, my sword cut straight through the other one like slicing a radish. Round after round, same result. My sword crushed everything it faced. Cora, Sophia, and Drew performed well too. Their blades shattered every opponent on contact. The examiners had clearly already identified the top 100. The collision rounds were mostly for showing the audience it was fair. Once the top 100 were decided, the announcement came. Tomorrow would be round 2, using fine-grade materials this time. Again, 2 portions each. As I left the arena, Sophia and Cora caught up to me. Behind us, Kazan stood alone on the field, watching me walk away until I disappeared from sight. Gugong appeared beside him and told him his mentality was terrible. He had the skill to make the top 100, but threw it away over one small mistake. After the competition, Cora and Sophia walked with me, showering me with compliments and complaints. Sophia couldn't believe how fast I'd improved, saying she'd thought she had a shot at winning, but now it seemed impossible. Cora was annoyed too, grumbling that they never should have let her brother teach me the star forging hammer technique. She elbowed me hard in the stomach to make her point. It actually hurt. The girl hit like a hammer herself. Then she tried to put me in a chokehold to demonstrate her grappling skills. We stopped messing around when a middle-aged man approached us. I recognized him from earlier. He'd been sitting next to Vice Master Gugong during the competition, so I figured he was someone important. Cora and Sophia greeted him as Master York. He introduced himself to me as the vice master of the Alchemist Guild and said he wanted to get to know me. I told him I'd actually taken alchemy classes before, but had no real talent for it. I'd only learned to identify some herbs and do basic potion mixing. That seemed to interest him. He started asking me strange questions, like whether I thought ordinary people with no talent could learn alchemy. I thought about it and said yes. They could learn to identify basic herbs and make simple potions, even if they'd never go deep into the field. At least they wouldn't be helpless when they found herbs in the wild. Then he asked whether pushing alchemy education to the general public was realistic. That's when I started to sense what he was really after. This man wanted to change the entire system. I understood the situation. If alchemy wanted to survive long-term, mass education was the only path. So I gave him an idea that went further than what he was expecting. I told him people didn't have to master just one discipline. Someone without great talent in forging or formations could study alchemy on the side. Instead of searching for dedicated alchemy students, why not encourage people to learn multiple skills? I called these people composite talents. York went silent for several minutes, just standing there thinking. Cora, Sophia, and I waited awkwardly. Then he suddenly burst out laughing. He loved the concept. He said it could even become an entirely new profession and asked me what I'd call it. I thought for a moment. The answer came naturally. Master York, how does alchemist sound? He repeated the word, paused, then started laughing even harder. Yes, that's exactly what it should be called. York wanted to keep talking, but Guild Master Kono came over looking suspicious and told him to stop bothering us since we had a competition tomorrow. York backed off but told me he'd adopt my suggestion and come find me again later. After he left, Kono asked what we'd discussed. I had nothing to hide, so I told him everything. The idea about composite talents and the name, alchemist. He was impressed, especially by the composite talent concept. I could tell he was starting to wonder if York was planning to leave the Alchemist Guild entirely, though the idea seemed too bold for him to fully believe. As I walked away, I could feel Kono watching me, probably wondering what was really going on inside my head, how I'd come up with something like that so casually. York apparently went straight home and started preparing to quit the Alchemist Guild and create a new Alchemist Guild. He was even thinking about giving me an honorary position. When I got home, I didn't rest. The day's competition had been too easy. I was still full of energy, so I trained instead. Milia saw me and got worried. I hadn't told her my results, so she assumed I'd lost and was upset. She wanted to comfort me, but didn't dare interrupt. So she went to the kitchen and put extra effort into making dinner. During training, I heard the notification, critical hit. All 4 base attributes increased by 1 point. That lucky point I got yesterday was already paying off. At dinner, I told Milia to sit and eat with me. She was surprised and thrilled. Over time, she'd realized I never treated her like a servant, more like a little sister. That's why she felt so relaxed around me. Why she'd panicked when I came home covered in blood instead of standing aside nervously like other servants would. Meeting me really was her good fortune. I intended to change her life. She asked how the exam went. I told her I got first place and that it had been too easy. Her eyes lit up. The next morning I arrived at the arena for round 2. Only 100 of us were left, but the crowd was even bigger. All the eliminated contestants had filled the spectator seats, hoping to learn from watching the better smiths. Naturally, I was the center of attention. I glanced at the VIP section and saw most of the guild leaders were still there. Didn't these people have anything better to do? Then again, in a world where personal strength was everything, most guild masters barely handled administrative work. They only stepped in when something major happened. So yes, they really were that free. The second round started. This time we were forging fine-grade weapons, a real step up from yesterday. The leaders up on stage knew this round would actually show my true level. Yesterday's ordinary materials were too easy. Even decent advanced blacksmiths could manage 9 refinements, just not as fast as me. I lit the furnace and started heating the ore while thinking about how many pieces to use. We each got 4 pieces, 2 portions worth. Most people would use 2 at a time, keeping the other 2 as backup. I hesitated for just a moment, then decided to throw all 4 in at once. When I dropped the 3rd piece into the star-picking furnace, I could see the leaders' expressions change. They couldn't believe I was using every piece of ore on a single weapon, leaving 0 margin for error. Each additional or dramatically increases the forging difficulty, especially with harder materials like these. I ignored them and focused. I cleared impurities from all four ores smoothly. Kono looked satisfied. He noticed my dust control had improved a lot. Before, I'd always use a little too much stabilizing powder, wasting some of the ore's energy. Today my control was perfect. While Drew and the other advanced blacksmiths were still preparing, I'd already finished my first refinement. The leaders started believing I might actually pull off 9 refinements within the 8-hour limit. But 9 wasn't my goal. These materials could handle 10 refinements maximum. Why settle for anything less than the ceiling? 4 hours in, I was on my 9th refinement. The contestants below were stunned. They kept calling me inhuman. But what impressed them most was my consistency. Near zero mistakes over hours of intense forging. Even top masters can't guarantee that. I finished the 9th refinement with half the time still remaining. Then instead of shaping the blade, I reheated the blank. The Alchemist Guild master couldn't believe it. He thought I was crazy. But York watched with something like admiration. He just had a feeling I'd pull it off. For the 10th refinement, I activated my lightning body enhancement. At this output level, my magic power would last exactly 4 hours, just enough. The heavy hammering echoed through the arena. Some contestants started questioning whether they even belonged in this profession. If they were meant for forging, why was the gap this enormous? Apparently, I looked like some ancient war god at work. The whole arena went quiet. The audience just watched in silence, mesmerized. An hour and a half later, I completed the 10th refinement. Then I spent another hour on shaping and finishing. With 1 hour still left on the clock, I stopped, assembled the weapon, and placed it on the forging stand. Everyone went silent when I finished with a full hour to spare. They'd expected me to barely make it in time, not cruise through it. Even I was surprised. I'd underestimated myself. Next time, I could probably try forging hero-grade equipment. The thought got my blood pumping. Hero-grade was a whole different level. Sometimes you needed monster body parts alongside ores, and combining different materials made the difficulty skyrocket. When the examiner picked up my sword, he froze for a moment. I could tell from his expression that he already knew the competition was over. The champion was decided. Everyone else was fighting for second place. He didn't say it out loud, though, just quietly carried my sword to the final testing area. I headed to the rest zone and started thinking about tomorrow's gold bracket. I looked at my forging hammer. The diamond hammer had served me well, but it was only magic-grade equipment. Time for an upgrade. I was going through tools a little too fast. I watched the remaining contestants. Only a few were worth paying attention to: Drew, Sophia, and Cora. Drew surprised me. He'd completed 9 refinements using a special forging technique called fire forging. He was working on a heated forging platform that kept the metal at constant high temperature, so he didn't need to reheat between strikes. It was incredibly efficient, but also incredibly dangerous, and it drained both stamina and magic power brutally. Yesterday, he'd used normal methods. I hadn't expected him to go this hard after just one day. His breathing was rough and heavy. His skin had turned dark from the constant heat exposure. His hands were shaking, but he wouldn't stop. I thought about whether pushing himself like this was worth it, and decided, yes, absolutely. Drew's talent was probably B rank at best, good enough for a comfortable life and an easy graduation. But if he wanted to reach the top, he had to fight for every single opportunity. That's exactly what he was doing. I respected that. The whole arena was watching him now. Many people were moved by his determination. With just 20 minutes left, he finally finished the blade. The crowd erupted in cheers. Even then, he stayed focused on his work, carefully completing the final assembly with 1 minute remaining. Drew and Kazan were complete opposites. Kazan's was like cheap glass. One tap, and it shattered. Drew's was like high-grade alloy. Nothing short of total destruction would break him. All 100 contestants passed. 0 failures. The worst among them had managed about 3 refinements, which was actually solid for mid-level blacksmiths. These were the best out of 4,000, after all. Then 20 examiners came out for the evaluation. This time, it wasn't sword against sword elimination. Instead, they ran each weapon through a series of tests. The more tests a sword passed, the higher the rank. First up was the strength test again. 10 strikes against a refined iron bar without breaking. It felt like watching a blade competition show, just without some of the theatrical flair. My sword went first, alongside Drew's and a few other top entries. The testing began. The examiner grabbed my sword and walked up to the refined iron bar. One swing, the bar split clean in two. He looked over at me in the rest area with a helpless expression. I could practically read his mind. This kid just forged a magic-grade weapon using fine-grade materials. That should not be possible, but I was not the only one who impressed. The examiner holding Drew's sword got the same result. One strike, and the iron bar was cut through. Cora and Sophia had both refined their weapons 8 times. Their swords did not cut through on the first swing, but they sliced most of the way through. A second hit would have finished the job easily. The first batch of 20 swords all passed without any real trouble. After the test, their blades showed only minor scratches. No actual damage worth mentioning. The audience started getting excited. This was clearly going to be a battle between the best, nothing like yesterday's competition. Then the second batch came up and things changed fast. A few of those swords still managed decent damage against the iron bar, but some could barely leave a mark. It was like watching someone give a massage instead of swinging a weapon. The crowd's energy dipped noticeably. The smiths who forged those weaker swords looked grim. Compared to the first group, the gap was painfully obvious. But those second batch swords turned out to be decent after all, because from the third batch onward, blades started curling at the edge. The fourth batch had widespread chipping and bending. By the fifth batch, some swords snapped into 3 or 4 pieces on impact. Watching this play out felt like watching a demonstration of the distance between genius and average. Under the same conditions, at the same age or younger, the talented ones could achieve things ordinary people could not even dream of. The gap was almost cruel. The guild leaders up on stage were not surprised. In this world, most competitions looked like this. The difference between the best and the rest was always enormous. Next came the second strength test. Yes, that is right. The first 3 rounds were all strength tests. That was the brutal part of this evaluation. After 3 rounds, roughly 90% of the weapons would be eliminated. The second test used mithril. In this world, mithril is not some soft fantasy metal. It is a super hard substance. This time they started testing from the weakest swords first. The 20 worst swords went up. On the first strike, a third of each blade broke off. Second strike, more broke. Third strike, even more. The test required surviving 5 hits, but not a single one of those 20 swords lasted that long. The following batches were not much better. Blades shattered, edges crumbled, metal bent and cracked. Every kind of failure showed up. When the full round was done, only weapons refined 6 times or more managed to survive. My sword and Drew's sword both cut through the mithril. It was thin mithril, nothing compared to the iron bar in terms of thickness, but the difficulty was still higher because of how hard the material was. Then came the third strength test. This time, the weapons only needed to survive a single strike. That sounds easy until you hear what the target was made of: refined gold, a metal far stronger than mithril. Even though the bar was extremely thin, many contestants swallowed hard when they saw it. They knew their weapons were good, but probably not good enough. I was curious too. My weapon was definitely above normal magic grade in strength, but could it actually cut through refined gold? I was not completely sure. They started from the bottom again. The swords that had survived 6 refinements hit the refined gold and shattered instantly. A sharp cracking sound rang out, making everyone behind them more nervous. One after another, the same result. Sword after sword broke on contact. Finally, they reached a sword with 7 refinements. When it hit the refined gold, a small chip flew off the blade, but the sword itself held together. It did not break. The owner of that sword let out a deep breath. As long as it survived, he passed. With only 4 weapons left untested, mine, Drew's, Sophia's, and Cora's, that meant he had secured at least 5th place no matter what happened next. 5th place would not earn an extraordinary flame, but it probably came with some decent reward. I could see him trying to convince himself of that. The examiner looked at him with approval, then picked up the next sword. It was Cora's. When she saw that her sword was chosen before Sophia's, she froze for a second. That meant the examiners considered her weapon slightly weaker than Sophia's. In their eyes, Cora ranked below her rival. I noticed her fists tighten. Cora liked to act like she was just at the academy to have a good time, but that was not the whole truth. As Kono's younger sister, she was actually extremely competitive when it came to forging. She did not want to lose to anyone her age. Behind the scenes, she worked incredibly hard. She often stayed in the forging room all night, practicing alone for hours. With her brother's guidance and lessons from top masters, her skills had grown fast. She was already among the very best young smiths around. But being among the best was not the same as being the best. Despite having solid talent and putting in tremendous effort, she always ended up near the bottom of this elite group. I could see how much that bothered her. The frustration was written all over her face. I understood that feeling. No matter how hard you work, sometimes there is someone ahead of you who seems to get there effortlessly. But the truth is, effort is never wasted. It just does not always show results on the timeline you want. 4 swords remained. Mine, Drew's, Sophia's, and Cora's. The real test was about to begin, and I was genuinely excited to see how my weapon would hold up against refined gold. This was the kind of challenge that made forging worth doing. The examiner swung Cora's sword against the refined gold. A tiny curl appeared at the edge of her blade, barely visible, but it was there. For most people that would count as an excellent result. But I could see how much it hurt Cora. She wanted perfection and did not get it. Next was Sophia's sword. The examiner struck the refined gold, and her blade came away completely undamaged. Not even the slightest curl. Both weapons had been refined 8 times, but Sophia's control during forging was clearly better than Cora's. Cora smiled and congratulated Sophia, but anyone paying attention could tell she was faking it. I noticed Kono watching his sister from the stands. He sighed, but did not seem worried. He knew Cora well enough to understand she was tough. She would not fall apart over a small setback. She would adjust and come back stronger. Then came Drew's sword. The examiner took a deep breath and swung hard against the refined gold. Drew's blade showed 0 damage. Instead, a small nick appeared on the refined gold itself. Drew exhaled with relief. He knew his final refinement had been rushed because of the brutal time pressure, so he had been nervous about whether his weapon could actually damage refined gold. Turns out his worry was unnecessary. Now only my sword remained. Everyone in the arena knew what the final question was. Could my 10 refinement fine-grade weapon actually cut through refined gold? The examiner picked up my sword. I could see he wanted to test it immediately. There was no time to admire the craftsmanship. He raised the blade and brought it down in a flash of white light. My sword sank deep into the refined gold. When the dust settled, the bar was hanging together by the thinnest sliver of metal. One more fraction of force, and it would have split completely. The examiner froze. I noticed something, though. Because the grip on my sword felt so natural and comfortable, he had instinctively put more power into his swing than intended. He caught himself at the last moment and actually pulled back some force. That meant the strike that nearly cut through was actually weaker than it should have been. The result was not entirely fair to me. He glanced at me with a guilty look. I could tell he was relieved my weapon performed well enough despite his mistake. He decided to keep the whole thing to himself. But plenty of experienced people in the audience had noticed the brief hesitation in his swing. Kono initially suspected someone had bribed the examiner to sabotage my score. But since my weapon still nearly cut through the refined gold even with reduced force, that proved its power was genuine regardless. I sighed. Still could not cut clean through. I noticed the examiner's pause too, but honestly, I felt the bigger issue was my own skill level. There was still room to improve. I would keep training. Drew stood up suddenly, staring at the result with wide eyes. His sword had only scratched the refined gold, but mine had nearly sliced it apart. The gap between us was visible to everyone in the arena. The Alchemist Guild master watched all of this with a dark expression. Now he could clearly see my true level. I was far more talented than Kono had been at my age. A genius like me absolutely could not be allowed to keep growing. He stood up and left the arena, his eyes carrying a dangerous glint. He had made up his mind to find a way to get rid of me. If I kept developing, the Blacksmith Guild surpassing the Alchemist Guild was only a matter of time. And once I left the academy, my growth would become even more terrifying. But people like him were the minority. Most of the important figures watching today wanted to get closer to me. Their thinking was simple and practical. Once I became a forging master someday, they wanted to be on good enough terms to skip the line when ordering custom weapons. After that, the remaining top swords went through additional tests covering sharpness, appearance, and craftsmanship. When all the results were tallied, my sword took first place in every single category by a massive margin. It was not even close. Kono stood up to announce the final results. The audience buzzed with excitement. This man was the church's #1 blacksmith, the only forging grandmaster, and an idol to countless smiths across the land. He thanked everyone for 2 days of incredible competition. He said he had seen the future of the church's forging community and that every contestant had impressed him. But then his tone shifted. He said there was one person who showed him the future of the entire forging profession. He said my name. He told the crowd that I was only 16 years old and had been forging for just 2 months. That statement hit like a bomb. The audience had known I was strong, but most had no idea about my actual age or how recently I had started. Shock spread through the arena like wildfire. Disbelief was written on hundreds of faces. All kinds of stares found their way to me. I kept my expression calm. Getting emotional over praise was pointless. What mattered was continuing to grow. Kono called me a chosen one and said I was the pride of all blacksmiths. He asked me to come up and collect my reward. I walked onto the stage. The crowd noise was overwhelming, but I blocked most of it out and focused on what Kono was holding. It was a special glass bottle containing a blue-purple flame that danced and flickered inside, alive with energy. He told me it was an extraordinary flame ranked 84th overall, called the Thunderstorm Rage Flame. He said it matched my attributes perfectly and should suit me well. I looked at the flame inside the bottle. Blue and purple light reflected off the glass, casting strange shadows across my hands. This was what I had been waiting for. With an extraordinary flame, I would no longer need fuel for forging. My efficiency and success rate would jump dramatically. Weapon strength would increase too. This single reward could push my forging ability to an entirely new level. The flame seemed to pulse faster as I held the bottle, almost like it recognized me. Maybe that was just my imagination, or maybe the lightning affinity between us was real. Either way, I was eager to absorb it and find out what I could really do with fire that never dies. I looked out at the crowd one more time. Thousands of eyes stared back at me. Some held admiration. Some held envy. A few probably held murderous intent. That was fine. Let them watch. Let them plan. I would keep forging, keep growing, and keep getting stronger. That was the only path that mattered. When Kono handed me the flame, I paused. He had said the prize would be a low-ranked, extraordinary flame. But this one was ranked 84th out of 128. That was way higher than I expected. He was clearly giving me special treatment right in front of everyone. I glanced at him. He winked at me, as if to say he was completely innocent. His logic was simple. I had lightning attributes, and the only lightning-type flame available in the guild happened to be this one. Were there lower-ranked lightning flames in storage? He was the guild master. He said there were none, so there were none. Nobody could argue with that. He asked if I planned to join the gold bracket tomorrow. I told him absolutely. I wanted to see how I measured up against older smiths. Then he asked if I would try absorbing the flame tonight. I said yes. He handed me a medicine bottle and told me to take it during the absorption process. It would help. Before I stepped off the stage, he grabbed my arm and warned me. If the flame felt too violent, I should stop immediately. Extraordinary flames could do serious damage to the body. There was no rush. I could wait until I was stronger. I nodded and told him I understood. I was not going to be reckless. I would test it tonight and back off if it was too dangerous. After me, Drew went up to receive his reward. Kono looked at him with genuine admiration and told him he had proved himself today. Drew and Sophia both received forging furnaces as their prizes. Kono praised Sophia as well. Then came Cora and the 5th-place finisher. When Cora stepped up, Kono told her that her performance was wonderful and that he was proud of her. She was only 4th, but he knew she had given everything she had. That was enough for him. Cora walked over and hugged her brother tightly. She thanked him. I could tell how much those words meant to her. Kono did not plan to comfort her any further, though. He knew his sister was not fragile. She would process the disappointment on her own and bounce back. I stayed through the rest of the ceremony. Kono personally handed out awards to the remaining top contestants, and I stuck around for all of it out of respect. The moment I left the competition grounds, someone was waiting for me. I recognized him immediately. It was Rienzaro, the master of the Alchemist Guild. We locked eyes, and he walked straight toward me. I was not surprised. I had expected to be approached by all kinds of people after today's performance, but I felt a quiet tension in my chest. Kono had warned me to be careful around the Alchemist Guild. Rien smiled at me, but it was the most unnatural smile I had ever seen. It looked forced, like he was wearing a mask that did not quite fit his face. He introduced himself and said he wanted to get to know the future forging master. Then he pulled out a medicine bottle and offered it as a greeting gift. He said it was his latest creation, something that could significantly boost training speed. He thought it might be useful for me. I took the bottle without hesitating. Refusing would have been awkward and pointless. I thanked him politely. His smile became noticeably more natural after I accepted the medicine, as if he had just accomplished something important. Then he turned around and left without another word. That exchange was seen by York, who came rushing over with urgency written all over his face. He asked me what the guild master had said. His tone was sharp, almost aggressive, which caught me off guard. I told him Rien had given me a bottle of medicine as a greeting gift, supposedly to help with training. York went quiet for a moment. I could see the gears turning behind his eyes. He was thinking about something that clearly troubled him. What I did not know at that time, but would learn later, was the full story behind Rien. He was actually an S-rank talent holder, and his talent gave him extraordinary ability in alchemy. He had dominated the field for years. But his talent came with a severe side effect, an extreme, almost pathological need to be the best at everything. He had to be first. He had to be unbeatable. He could not accept anyone threatening his position. Years of unchallenged success had fed that compulsion until it consumed him completely. The person he used to be, someone who simply loved improving his skills and pushing the boundaries of alchemy, was gone. In his place stood a man who was arrogant, controlling, and convinced that everything he did was justified. When I first became famous at the academy, nobody had actually wanted to move against me. It was Rien who planted that idea. He was the one pushing others to see me as a threat that needed to be eliminated. The reason was almost absurd in its simplicity. I reminded him of himself. Just like him, I had arrived at the academy and immediately shaken the entire church with my talent. The difference was that he had taken over half a year to achieve what I managed in weeks. And I had surpassed Kono, who Rien considered just an ordinary person playing at being a guild master. My talent terrified him because I was the one person he believed could actually surpass him. Only someone this similar to him could pose a real threat. So he decided I had to be removed. Not because I had done anything to him. Not because of any real conflict between us. Simply because my existence challenged his belief that he was untouchable. He needed to protect his alchemy empire, and in his twisted mind, killing a 16-year-old boy was a perfectly reasonable way to do it. Yerk knew all of this. He understood Rien's psychology better than almost anyone. That was why he had rushed over the moment he saw us talking. Now he was standing in front of me, struggling with a decision. Should he tell me the truth about Rien? Should he warn me that the bottle of medicine in my hand might not be what it seemed? I watched Yerk's face shift through several expressions. Something was clearly wrong. The medicine bottle suddenly felt heavier in my hand. I had accepted it casually, thinking it was just a political gesture from a rival guild leader trying to build goodwill. But York's reaction was making me reconsider. I had already learned one important lesson since arriving at this academy. When someone powerful gives you something for free and smiles while doing it, you should always ask yourself what they are really buying. Rien's smile had been wrong from the start. I noticed it the second I saw him. I just had not connected it to anything concrete yet. Now, watching York wrestle with whatever secret he was holding back, the pieces were starting to come together. The medicine bottle stayed in my pocket. I was not going to throw it away, but I was definitely not going to drink it either. Not until I understood exactly what was inside and why the most powerful alchemist in the church had personally delivered it to a 16-year-old blacksmith he had no reason to care about. Yerk stood in front of me, clearly struggling with a decision. He was still part of the Alchemist Guild, so helping me would basically mean betraying his own people. But if he stayed silent, and something happened to me later, he knew he would regret it forever. He made his choice. He told me that Guildmaster Rien had hostile intentions toward me. He warned me to be careful around the entire Alchemist Guild and not to trust any of them. Then he asked if he could examine the medicine Rien had given me. I handed over the bottle without hesitation. I did not fully trust Yerk either, but letting him look at it cost me nothing. He poured out one pill and studied it closely. Then he started praising it. He said the fragrance was rich, the color was vibrant, and just smelling it made the magic power inside his body stir. He called it a masterpiece worthy of Rien's reputation. I watched him compliment the thing he was supposed to be checking for poison and felt my eye twitch. Was this supposed to be helping me? After a few minutes, he admitted that his skill level was below Rien's, so he could not identify any problems yet. He asked for one night to analyze it properly and promised he would have answers by tomorrow. Then he said he wanted to give me a greeting gift too. He pulled out several gemstones. He explained they were valuable, could improve physical constitution when worn, and could be exchanged for about 10,000 points at the academy. The gift was straightforward and practical. I could tell he was worried I would not trust him. So instead of offering potions or mysterious items, he just gave me something I could convert to cash and spend however I wanted. Smart approach. I already had plenty of money, but refusing would have been rude. This was his way of showing sincerity, and for a newcomer at the academy, 10,000 points was genuinely generous. I thanked him and he left, promising to return tomorrow with results. On my way home, several more guild leaders intercepted me. These were smaller guild masters, not nearly as important as Rien or Kono, though every one of them was far stronger than me in terms of combat power. They all wanted to introduce themselves and build a connection. By the time I finally reached my house, I was exhausted from socializing. I greeted Milia and immediately started examining the extraordinary flame I had won. I was not going to absorb it blindly. The glass bottle had a special design, a small hole in the cap that let you test the flame's intensity without fully opening it. This way you could feel how strong the fire's erosion would be before committing. I put my finger into the hole. Instantly, a violent wave of numbness and burning pain shot through my entire body. My back went rigid for a moment before I yanked my hand away. I stared at the dancing blue-purple flame inside the bottle with a healthy dose of fear. The answer was clear. I could not handle the thunderstorm rage flame right now. Even though my lightning attributes matched perfectly, the flame was ranked 84th. I had only been training for 2 months. There was no way my body was ready for something that powerful. I looked at the medicine Kono had given me earlier. It was called a basalt pill. When swallowed, it would generate earth attribute magic power inside the body to protect the internal organs. It was specifically designed for absorbing lightning-type items. Definitely useful, but even with that protection, I was fairly certain I still could not endure the absorption process. The flame was simply too strong for my current level. So I set aside the flame for now and decided to go shopping instead. I had plenty of money saved up, and it was time to spend some of it on better equipment. I headed to the blacksmith guild. The front desk was not staffed by Cora tonight. Instead, there was a young girl who had recently joined the guild. When she saw me, her eyes went wide. She asked if I was Master Clan. I confirmed it. She got visibly excited. Between the 2 days of competition and Kono's speech calling me the chosen one, I had apparently become an idol among young blacksmiths. She could barely contain herself. She asked what I needed. I told her I wanted to buy a forging hammer. She immediately offered to take me to the warehouse. Apparently, Cora had left standing instructions that if I came to buy anything, I should get direct warehouse access and a 20% discount on whatever I wanted. I appreciated that. Nobody questioned the special treatment either, given everything that had happened. As we walked, I noticed the girl kept stealing glances at me. I knew why. My charisma stat was at 80 points now. Even without any talent or fame, that kind of number made people naturally drawn to you. It was just that my forging ability had become so prominent that people tended to overlook my appearance entirely. Inside the warehouse, I went straight to the forging hammers. Unlike before, I only looked at hammers priced above 10,000 points. My old diamond hammer had served me well, but I had outgrown it. I needed something that matched my current abilities. It did not take long to find what I wanted. My eyes locked onto a weapon called the Purple Thunder Diamond Hammer. The price was exactly 30,000 points. What caught my attention were the 4 enchantment properties listed on it: precision, power, lightning attribute enhancement, and mastery. That was unusual. Hammers in this price range normally only had 3 properties. 4 was rare and suggested there was something special about this particular weapon. 3 of the 4 properties were basic enchantments, nothing extraordinary on their own. But the lightning attribute enhancement was a genuinely powerful property. Combined with the other 3, this hammer would be a massive upgrade over my current tool. The lightning enhancement would synergize with my attributes perfectly, and the precision and mastery properties would help with the finer aspects of forging that became critical at higher levels. I stared at the hammer, already imagining how it would feel in my hand. 30,000 points was a serious amount of money, but I had enough. And in this profession, your tools were part of your strength. A great blacksmith with a mediocre hammer was like a swordsman with a dull blade. You could still fight, but you were leaving performance on the table. The question lingering in my mind was simple. Why did this hammer have 4 properties instead of 3? Was it a manufacturing anomaly? A hidden flaw that added an extra property as compensation? Or was this genuinely a superior piece of equipment that had been underpriced? I intended to find out before spending 30,000 points. Even with money to spare, I was not the type to buy something I did not fully understand. I picked up the purple Thunder Diamond hammer and immediately understood why it had 4 properties instead of 3. The thing was absurdly heavy. Even with my current strength, I struggled with it. When I activated my lightning body to control it, the weight became manageable but still taxing. Using it would drain my magic power much faster. I estimated about 3 hours before I would be completely emptied. But the efficiency boost would be significant. I thought about it briefly and decided to buy it anyway. The value was too good to pass up. Once my stats climbed higher, the weight would stop being a problem. I was going to need a new hammer eventually, so why not get one I could grow into? When I told the girl I wanted it, she did not seem surprised. Then she said something unexpected. Because of my performance over the past 2 days, every weapon I had left on consignment at the guild had sold out completely. The total came to 158,000 points. She had planned to deliver the money to me tomorrow, but since I was here, she processed it on the spot. I was stunned. I knew winning the competition would boost my reputation, but I had not expected all my inventory to sell instantly. After paying 30,000 for the hammer, my balance jumped to 128,000. With that kind of money, I could finally invest in proper training resources. That had been the whole point of forging nonstop these past weeks. Earn money, buy resources, get stronger. I carried the heavy hammer home first. Just holding it gave me a strange excitement. Training with something this heavy would push my strength up fast. Then I headed to the shop to browse training supplies. When I walked in, I ran into Shaga and her group. Their sales guide was Stacy, the same girl who had helped us before. Stacy greeted me warmly and said it had been a while. Shaga, Winnie, and Gato all turned to look at me. Shaga told me they had taken on a simpler mission since I was not available to join them. They could handle it with their own strength. I could tell they had all matured a bit since I last saw them. They had clearly been working hard and making progress. I nodded with approval. Stacy offered to show all of us around together. Shaga agreed eagerly. I could sense she was trying to stay calm, but underneath she was still nervous around me. She had never really gotten over her feelings, and now that I kept growing stronger and more famous, the distance between us was only widening. I noticed it, but did not address it. Some things were better left alone. Gato watched me silently from behind. Ever since I saved his life, he had been training like a madman, trying to catch up so he could repay the debt someday. But the gap kept getting wider, not smaller. I could see the frustration in his eyes, mixed with stubborn determination. He was not the type to give up. If he could not match my pace, he would just push himself harder, double, 5 times, 10 times the effort. I respected that mentality. Stacy asked what level of resources I needed. I told her 3rd-tier lightning attribute resources. Shaga and the others froze. 3rd-tier resources were meant for people around level 30. They had not realized I had already reached that stage. We went up to the 2nd floor, which carried resources from Tier 2 through Tier 4. This was the first time Shaga's group had even been up here. Stacy began showing me the options. First was Thunder Iron Stone, a tiny mineral the size of a fingernail, worn on the body to slowly enhance constitution for lightning users. 1,000 points each. I could tell it was a quality item, but the growth rate was painfully slow. My natural attribute gains were already faster than what this thing offered. Not worth it. Next was Thunder Fruit, a mild consumable that lightning types could eat raw without any processing. It boosted magic power based on how developed your body was. 2,000 points each. Interesting, but not amazing. Then she showed me Thunder Spirit Pills. These were used during training to massively accelerate magic power growth, with an additional effect of strengthening the body's foundation. 3,000 points per bottle, 10 pills per bottle. I looked over the options carefully, calculating costs and benefits in my head. With over 100,000 points to spend, I needed to be smart about it. The Thunder Spirit Pills seemed like the best value. Direct training enhancement with foundation strengthening was exactly what I needed right now. The Thunder Fruit had potential too, since my body development was already far ahead of most people my age, meaning I would probably get above-average returns from eating them. The key was not to waste money on things that grew me slower than I was already growing naturally. Every purchase had to accelerate my progress beyond what I could achieve on my own. Otherwise, it was just throwing points away. Stacy finished explaining the products, and I asked about side effects. She said everything they sold was mild and safe, but there were limits. Thunderfruit. Only 3 per person, ever. After 3, the body stops responding to it. Thunder Spirit pills. Maximum 3 per day, or you start taking damage. Good enough for me. I started ordering. 3 Thunder Fruits, 2 bottles of Thunder Spirit pills, 2 bottles of third-tier body strengthening potions, 5 bottles of second-tier power pills, 5 bottles of second-tier magic recovery potions. Shaga and her group went completely silent, watching me rattle off the list like I was ordering dinner. The total came to 31,500 points. But because I spent over 30,000 in one purchase, I qualified for VIP status. 5% discount on everything going forward. Final price, 29,925 points. I swiped my badge without flinching. It was a lot of money, but I could earn it back quickly. I noticed Shaga, Winnie, and Gato staring at me like statues. I told them I had things to do and left. If they needed anything, they could come find me. Back home, I pulled out the Thunderfruits first. They looked like purple apples, which honestly reminded me of a witch's poisoned apple. Not the most appetizing sight, but I bit into one anyway. A mild electric current flowed through my mouth. Strange but pleasant, almost exciting. I finished the fruit quickly. The current spread through my entire body, and my magic power started climbing rapidly. My stats were already changing. Third-tier resources were no joke. But after a while, the pleasant feeling shifted into a stinging pain. I had expected that. Medicine always comes with some suffering. The pain stayed within my limits, though. If anyone had been watching, they would have seen veins bulging across my body, my heart pounding violently, my whole frame shaking like I was about to explode. I was glad I had told Milia not to watch me train. She would have fainted. An hour later, my body cooled down. Without hesitating, I ate the second fruit. Stacy had said they could be taken consecutively with no side effects. They just stopped working after 3. The second one hit harder. The pain was noticeably worse, but still bearable. Lightning energy was digging deeper into my body now, clearing out impurities, opening up pathways, making my magic flow smoother. After another hour, I could see my muscles had visibly tightened and hardened from the tempering. Then the third fruit. I knew what was coming but ate it without a pause. The lightning tore through me like a wild animal. I could not hold back a groan. The power inside me kept swelling and swelling until I lost control and punched the air beside me. My fist smashed straight through my bed, collapsing it. But I could not stop. I kept throwing punches in every direction, trying to release the overwhelming energy rampaging inside me. My room was getting destroyed, but I did not care. Milia heard the noise and looked toward my room with worry, but she remembered my instructions. No matter what happened, do not come in. She stayed away. That final hour was the longest of my life. Every second dragged. By the end, my room was wrecked, furniture smashed, walls dented. When the pain finally stopped, I dropped to the floor like a stone. There was absolutely no chance I was training anymore tonight. I needed rest. I checked my stats. Strength, 94. Agility, 73. Constitution, 82. Spirit, 70. All 4 had jumped dramatically. My magic power had surged. And the biggest surprise, my lightning attribute talent had gone up by 1 point, now sitting at 9. My other attributes read: Charm 82, Luck 6, Lifespan 96. My forging talent had climbed to 16, Hammer Technique talent to 5. The Thunderfruits had done far more than I expected. They had not just boosted my raw power. They had refined my body at a fundamental level, clearing pathways and strengthening my foundation in ways that normal training would have taken weeks to achieve. I lay on the floor of my destroyed room, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow was the gold bracket competition. I would be walking in with stats that had exploded overnight. The purple Thunder Diamond Hammer was waiting for me too, and with my strength now at 94, it would not feel nearly as heavy as it had earlier tonight. Everything was accelerating. My growth, my resources, my connections, my enemies. The Alchemist Guild Master wanted me dead. The Pope was secretly backing me. Yerk was investigating a possibly poisoned medicine bottle. Sophia was reporting my movements. And tomorrow I would be competing against blacksmiths up to 30 years old with only 2 months of forging experience. I smiled at the cracked ceiling. Let them come. All of them. This was the power of resources. When you had them, you could leave everyone without them far behind. Looking at my new stats gave me an instant energy boost. I felt less tired already. I dragged myself up and left my rec room. Milia looked over the moment my door opened. My clothes had been torn apart during the transformation, revealing most of my upper body. The muscles underneath were well-defined, but not exaggerated, lean and proportional. I seemed to have grown taller too. Everything about my frame looked more balanced and coordinated than before. Milia's face turned bright red, and she quickly looked away. I told her to heat up some bath water. She rushed off to prepare it. The house the church provided had decent amenities, including a bathtub with a small heating magic circle built in. You just fed it a little magic power, and the water warmed right up. Magic really did change daily life. Once the water was ready, I stripped off my ruined clothes and sank into the tub. The moment my body hit the warm water, I felt the tension melt away. The exhaustion that had been crushing me faded by half, almost instantly. Milia placed clean clothes and 2 drinks nearby without being asked. I told her I would be about 30 minutes and asked her to prepare food. Half an hour passed in what felt like seconds. I reluctantly climbed out, dried off, dressed, and headed to the dining area. The moment I bit into the first piece of meat, I stopped chewing. Something was different. I asked Milia what was going on with the meat today. She got nervous immediately. She explained that the delivery was different from usual. Instead of ordinary meat, today they had sent monster beast meat. She had been worried while cooking it, afraid I would not like it. I told her it was delicious, and it really was. The flavor was rich, the juices were incredible, and after swallowing, I could feel my magic power recovering slightly. This was not low-quality beast meat either. It was the good stuff. There was no way the delivery person had made a mistake. This was intentional. The Pope had started improving my living conditions, beginning with these small details. Not bad at all. Monster beast meat could not normally be eaten raw or unprepared because it contained toxins alongside its magic energy. But after centuries of fighting these creatures, humans had developed methods to remove the poison while preserving the magical properties. That made properly prepared beast meat extremely expensive. Higher-level beast meat was actually easier to process because stronger monsters had fewer toxins and more concentrated magic power. I ate until I physically could not swallow another bite. But that turned out to be only about a third of my usual portion. The magic energy in the meat was so dense that it filled me up completely in a fraction of the normal amount. One more mouthful, and everything would have come back up. I told Milia to try the leftover meat herself. It was genuinely good, and eating it regularly could strengthen her body and extend her lifespan. Then I remembered and came back to tell her to only cook a third of the usual amount from now on. I simply could not finish more than that. She nodded and took a curious bite. Her eyes lit up immediately. She could taste the difference too. Back in my room, I stared at the destruction I had caused. The bed was collapsed, furniture was smashed, and there were dents in the walls. I had completely forgotten about the mess. Fortunately, one corner of the mattress was still flat enough to lie on, good enough for one night. Before closing my eyes, I thought about Quinn. I had eaten at his house before and noticed his family only had ordinary meat. If I could share the beast meat with him, it would boost his growth significantly. But I could not just hand it over without explanation. If someone noticed my food supply had changed, and then Quinn suddenly started eating beast meat too, they would connect the dots to the Pope backing me. That would put me in serious danger. I thought about it for a long time, but could not find a safe excuse. Every option had the risk of exposure. So I decided to wait. Once I was stronger and more established, I could find a way to help Quinn without drawing attention. It was frustrating. I wanted to repay him now, but the timing was wrong. Protecting the secret of my relationship with the Pope was more important than immediate gratitude. I made peace with that reasoning and drifted off to sleep. Then the notification hit. Lightning attribute talent +1. Again, my lightning talent was now at 10 points. The lucky stat was working overtime. First, the full attribute boost. Now another lightning talent point on top of the one from the thunder fruits. This was getting ridiculous. Sleep was suddenly impossible. I jumped up and started practicing the thunder summoning technique. The difference was immediate and staggering. Magic power flowed through me at a speed I had never experienced before. It felt like I could control it with pure thought, no effort at all. The sensation was intoxicating. I lost myself in the practice completely. When I finally came back to awareness, morning light was streaming through the window. The entire night had passed without me noticing, and my thunder summoning technique had broken through to level 4. At level 4, something fundamental changed. I could feel lightning attribute magic power constantly circulating through my body without any conscious effort on my part. It was identical to having my lightning body enhancement active at all times, but it cost 0 magic power. The lightning body had become a permanent passive ability for me now. The implications were massive. Because it was passive, I could activate the regular lightning body enhancement on top of it. When I tested this, my physical attributes doubled again from an already enhanced baseline. The numbers reached a level that was frankly terrifying. My base stats were already at the point where I matched S-rank talent holders in raw growth speed. Now, with double lightning body stacked on a passive enhancement, my combat potential in short bursts was something else entirely. I stood in my destroyed room, lightning crackling faintly across my skin without any effort on my part. I was 16 years old, 2 months into my training, and I could already feel the gap between me and the people who wanted me dead shrinking rapidly. A few more weeks of this kind of growth and the balance of power would shift permanently. Today was the gold bracket competition. Time to see how a 16-year-old with 10 points in lightning talent compared against experienced blacksmiths twice his age. I pulled on fresh clothes, grabbed my new purple Thunder Diamond hammer, and headed for the door. I picked up the purple Thunder Diamond hammer again. The heaviness from yesterday was gone. It actually felt lighter than my old diamond hammer now. My overnight stat gains had completely solved the weight problem. I checked my attributes and noticed something odd. After the thunder summoning breakthrough, each stat had only gone up by 2 or 3 points. I had expected a bigger jump from reaching level 4. I made a mental note to ask Quinn about it. I headed out for the gold bracket competition, but barely made it past my street before running into York. He had been waiting at the intersection for me since early morning. He got straight to the point. After studying Rien's medicine all night, he had found the problem. The pills contained an herb called purple vein grass. In small doses, it genuinely helped with training and boosting strength. But in larger amounts, it was extremely addictive. Even level 60 powerhouses could not control themselves once hooked. The symptoms included hallucinations, convulsions, and fainting. If you kept consuming it, the toxins would accumulate and start eating away at your internal organs. The good news was that the amount in Rien's pills was not enough to cause instant severe addiction. It would only create a mild dependency. But I could see the full picture clearly. Once I finished the bottle and started craving more, Rien would have me exactly where he wanted me. He would control the supply and move to the next phase of whatever plan he had. Anger surged through me. I had never provoked Rien. We had not even met before yesterday. Yet he was already trying to destroy me without a word of explanation. Fine. If that was how he wanted to play it, I would not forget this. York suggested I not take the pills, but instead sell them individually. 1 pill at a time would cause no harm to anyone, and I could make decent money from it. I laughed and thanked him. We parted ways at the intersection, both carrying new worries. I arrived at the arena and spotted several familiar faces in the audience. Shaga and her group were there. I waved and Winnie waved back, so enthusiastically her hand looked like a fan. Then I noticed Quinn sitting in a corner, trying to hide. He had clearly snuck in to watch me compete, but did not want to seem like he cared. I spotted him immediately and walked over. He started scrambling internally, probably preparing some excuse for why he was here. I called his name. He tried to play it cool, then gave up and admitted he was curious about the forging competition. Then his expression changed suddenly. He stared at me with disbelief. He asked if my thunder summoning technique had broken through. I confirmed it and told him that was actually what I wanted to talk to him about. He went quiet for a moment. I could tell the news hit him hard. He was only at peak level 4 himself, and he had been practicing for years. He had expected me to need a few more months at least. He guessed my question before I asked it. He knew I was wondering why my stat boost from the breakthrough felt smaller than expected. He explained that over the next month, my stats would continue rising by a small amount each day, similar to today's gain. When I did the math, that meant roughly 60 to 70 points added to each attribute over a month. That was an enormous total gain. Quinn told me something else that stuck with me. He said that from this point forward, I was no longer an ordinary person. He could see how drastically the thunder summoning technique was enhancing me, and this was only a basic lightning technique. In the future, if I learned more advanced lightning methods, my power would grow even further beyond what anyone could predict. He was right. The thunder summoning technique was not even a high-level method. The reason I seemed so overwhelmingly powerful compared to people my age was simply my ridiculous growth speed. Most of my peers were still stuck on level 1 of their techniques, or had not even started properly. I was already at level 4. That gap made me look invincible, but it was really just a head start. The real power would come later, when I had techniques worthy of my talent. The reason I progressed so much faster than others, even with a mid-level technique, was my approach to training. Most people just grinded mindlessly in one direction. I would stop periodically, review what I had just done, and adjust if anything felt off. I refused to continue down a wrong path. It might not look like the fastest method, but it was incredibly stable. No wasted effort, no backtracking, no irreversible mistakes. The gold bracket had about 2,000 contestants, far fewer than the 4,000 in bronze. That seemed strange since the academy had been running for years, producing graduates constantly. But the death rate at the academy was horrifyingly high, and many people who survived ended up leaving the blacksmith profession entirely. The middle generation had been gutted by attrition. If the blacksmith guild ever became the top guild, that problem would fix itself as more people stuck with the craft. Looking at these competitors, I grew cautious. Just watching them, I could feel how strong they were. Every single one had steady, determined eyes, as if each believed they could win the whole thing. This was nothing like bronze. The rules were different too. We still used officially provided materials, but this time we chose our own from a selection of magic-grade crafting materials. If we passed this round, the next one would require forging hero-grade weapons. I was genuinely curious whether I could manage that. The time limit was 24 hours instead of 8. That made sense. Magic-grade forging was exponentially harder, and 8 hours would not let anyone show their real abilities. I picked my materials and fired up the star-picking furnace. In bronze, my equipment advantage had been massive. Today, not so much. Some contestants pulled out furnaces ranked even higher than mine. These were people 10 or 15 years older than me with decades of accumulation. Among them were mostly advanced blacksmiths, a good number of full blacksmiths, and 5 forging masters. Even Guildmaster Kono was technically young enough to compete, but chose not to. As a grandmaster, he had nothing left to prove. The audience was the largest yet. Drew and Sophia had also entered the gold bracket. They knew they would not rank high, but any finish outside dead last came with rewards. Free money was free money. When the competition started, something shocked everyone. My forging speed was keeping up with the first tier of competitors. I was behind the 5 forging masters, sure, but I was matching the regular blacksmith stride for stride. Kono noticed and quickly figured out why. My stats had jumped overnight from the training resources I bought. The other guild leaders reached the same conclusion, but the ordinary spectators who did not understand resource-boosted growth were losing their minds. One day had passed, and I looked like a completely different smith. Not everyone was happy about the attention I was getting. One of the 5 forging masters was visibly irritated. He believed he should be the star of this competition, not some teenage upstart. He admitted I had talent, but thought this was not my era yet. His anger did not affect his hands, though. His technique stayed flawless even while he fumed. I ignored all of it and focused purely on my work. A quarter hour in, a large wave of blacksmiths, including me, began the first refinement almost simultaneously. 10 minutes later, first refinement done. 20 minutes after that, second refinement complete. A few smiths started falling behind. 40 minutes more, third refinement finished. More dropped off. 2 hours in, fourth refinement done. Half the blacksmiths had now fallen out of pace. I was still in the pack. For hours, fifth refinement complete. 7 hours, sixth refinement done. Normally by this point, I would have been struggling, but today felt completely different. My body was flowing with passive lightning energy. My stats had exploded overnight, and the purple thunder diamond hammer felt like an extension of my arm. I was still comfortable. Not tired, not strained. Just steady and focused. The audience started buzzing. They wanted to know how far I could go. If I kept pace until the very end, it would prove I already had the skill level of a top-tier blacksmith, at 16 years old with 2 months of experience. Kono watched me from the stands and figured I would probably surpass 7 refinements this time. He had apparently stopped comparing me to his younger self. He admitted I had surpassed him in forging ability. 12 hours in, I completed the 6th refinement. The first tier of competitors had started to separate by speed, and I was no longer the fastest among them. But with 24 hours total, I had plenty of time. I activated my lightning body to push faster and started the 7th refinement. Even though a 7 times refined magic-grade weapon was incredibly hard, my new hammer and boosted stats made it feel manageable. At hour 16, I finished the 7th refinement. 8 hours remained. I could feel that an 8th refinement was possible, but I was not sure I could finish in time. I looked ahead at the 5 forging masters. They had already completed 11 refinements and were resting, though I noticed they were all watching me. My speed had clearly shocked them. After a brief hesitation, I committed to the 8th refinement. I was not content being a chaser. For the past few days, I had been the best in every competition. Today, I was playing catch-up, and honestly, that feeling bothered me. I wanted to push further. Under the lightning body enhancement, my forging speed was blazing. But something else started happening that I did not notice at first. Kono spotted it from above. My movements were becoming smoother with every strike, as if the hammer and I were merging into one. My star forging hammer technique had quietly broken through to level 3, proficient mastery. It had actually overtaken my thunderclap sword technique, which I had been learning longer. The reason made sense when I thought about it later. The star forging hammer technique was fundamentally a power-based method. The stronger the user's body, the easier it was to grasp the technique's essence. Hammer techniques were also inherently less demanding on pure talent than swordsmanship. Combined with weeks of daily forging practice, the breakthrough was almost inevitable. With the upgraded technique, everything clicked into place. At hour 19, I completed the 8th refinement. I immediately started shaping and finishing without checking the clock. I assumed I had only 2 or 3 hours left. I finished all assembly by hour 21. Then I looked at the time and froze. 3 full hours remained. I had completely misjudged my own speed. Checking my stats, I found small increases across the board, the lingering effects of the thunder summoning breakthrough, just as Quinn had described. And then I saw it in my skill list. Star Forging Hammer, level 3. I had not even realized it happened during forging. With 3 hours to spare, I used the time wisely. I inspected every detail of my sword, the grip feel, the blade sharpness, the balance. I wrapped the handle with cord to improve durability and comfort, which also made the whole weapon look more refined. The blacksmiths around me watched in silence as I fussed over every tiny detail. Several of them swallowed hard. This kind of obsessive attention to finishing was exactly what separated good smiths from great ones. Once I was satisfied, the examiner took my sword for testing. Since there were many contestants, they tested weapons as they came in. The examiner gripped my sword and immediately noticed the quality of the feel. He channeled lightning magic through it and swung. A terrifying arc of lightning sword energy flashed out and sliced through an iron training dummy, cutting it clean in half. He noted the lightning attribute amplification was excellent, roughly a 30% power boost for a third-tier fighter. The magic conductivity was flawless, with 0 lag during power transfer. Then he flooded the blade with massive amounts of magic to test structural integrity. The sword hummed softly, but showed no cracks at all. Every test earned another satisfied nod from the examiner. Final score, 92 points. I exhaled with relief. The 5 forging masters had all scored perfect hundreds. The blacksmiths ranked above me scored between 90 and 90-something. 90 was essentially the minimum standard for this tier's established blacksmiths. At 92, I had cleared that bar comfortably as a 16-year-old competing against people nearly twice my age. I headed to the rest area and sat down to watch the remaining contestants finish their work. As I settled in, the familiar notification chimed in my head. 1 constitution point gained for the day. The thunder summoning breakthrough was still feeding me steady growth, exactly as Quinn had promised. Drew and Sophia were still forging while I rested. Drew had switched back to normal forging instead of fire forging. Yesterday's method had clearly taken a toll on him. He completed 6 refinements, and his new furnace was obviously helping. Sophia matched him at 6. Everyone had grown through this tournament, but I shifted my attention to the blacksmiths who were still working ahead of me. They were slower not because they lacked skill, but because they were pushing 9, 10, even 11 refinements. Every one of them was stronger than me at this stage. I clenched my fists watching them. The gap was real, but I knew it would not last long. I studied their techniques carefully, absorbing everything I could. These top-tier blacksmiths were my next target. When the results came in, my 92 points earned me rank 141. Only the top 100 advanced, which meant I was eliminated. I was not surprised. The gold bracket had over 300 full blacksmiths competing. Ranking 141 actually meant I had surpassed most of them. My problem was simply time. 2 months of forging experience left too many gaps in my knowledge. The prize for my rank was a large batch of high-quality ores worth about 20,000 points. I was satisfied with that. First place went to a forging master named Dick, the same guy who had been annoyed about me stealing his spotlight all day. After collecting his award, he marched straight toward me through the crowd. The audience got excited, thinking they were about to witness a veteran encouraging a rising star. A touching moment of passing the torch. The guild leaders knew better. Kono's face went dark immediately. Gugong asked if they should stop him. Kono shook his head. There was no stopping Dick. The man was 29 years old with the competitive heart of an 18-year-old. He would never admit anyone was better than him. Dick stopped in front of me, stuck out his thumb, then flipped it upside down. He told me I was nowhere near ready to compete with him and called me a brat. Then he turned around and walked away. I stood there stunned for a second. Was this guy seriously a forging master? He was acting like a child. But I had to admit, his petty provocation actually lit a fire in me. I almost laughed from the sheer audacity. In my head, I was screaming, "Just give me 3 years, old man, and I will crush you." That was too childish to say out loud, though. I was better than that. "Give me 3 years," I said. Dick spun around. I told him that within 3 years, I would surpass him. His eyes turned serious. The crowd was confused. What happened to the heartwarming generational moment? He scoffed and said 30 years would not be enough, let alone 3. He told me not to compare him to the weaklings I had been beating. I called him scared. I said old men were like that. That word, old, made him snap instantly. He accepted the challenge on the spot. 3 years. If I surpassed him, he would admit I was better and apologize. The promise of an apology from a forging master set my blood on fire. I told him 3 years, and we would see. He left. The audience did not know what to make of us. Some thought we were both idiots whose cool images had just shattered. But most were genuinely excited to see how the 3-year bet would play out. Over the next 5 days, I watched the remaining competitions. 2 days for the gold bracket finals, 3 days for the diamond bracket. As a spectator, I learned an enormous amount, especially from Diamond. Dick competed there too and showed his real abilities, successfully forging a glorious grade weapon. He only placed third because the guild master and vice master also entered, but third among diamond tier masters was still incredible. I talked trash about him in my head, but honestly, I learned a great deal from watching his techniques. During those 5 days, my stats continued climbing from the thunder summoning breakthrough. Strength gained 14, agility 12, constitution 11, spirit 15. The steady daily growth Quinn had described was adding up fast, and we were not even halfway through the month-long effect yet. After the forging tournament ended, I returned to my daily routine of training and forging. But a new event was approaching, the Newcomer Combat Tournament. Winning first place there would raise my noble rank by 1 tier. My current rank of Viscount was already decent, but climbing higher was always welcome. My schedule was packed. Every day felt busy. Training had become my main priority now. Meanwhile, the Pope had seen my tournament results. Even though he already knew about my forging talent, my performance in the gold bracket apparently shocked him. He was starting to believe I could one day become a divine craftsman, someone capable of forging god-tier weapons. Each divine weapon would deepen the church's foundation and strength. The thought clearly excited him. He had already locked down information within the church to prevent my results from spreading, but he knew that was only a temporary measure. Other nations would find out eventually. It was just a matter of time. The Pope also decided I needed some real combat experience before the upcoming tournament. He was planning to arrange something for me. The next morning, I woke up and started my basic training. My daily sword swings had increased to 10,000 repetitions. I had forged myself a special heavy training sword to make each swing count more. With my improved physical stats, 10,000 swings with that weight was the perfect training load. No need to increase the count when the difficulty per swing was already so high. After training, I planned to head to the guild and attempt forging hero-grade equipment. I still wanted to know if I could pull it off. But the moment I stepped outside, Sophia was waiting for me. The instant I saw her, I knew the Pope had sent her with a task. She asked me to go to the arena with her. The Colosseum, specifically. I was surprised. That place was dangerous. She acknowledged the risk, but explained that contestants ranked Viscount or above had protections in place. If you felt you were about to lose, you could surrender, and the staff would intervene to rescue you. Then she told me something that really caught my attention. For newcomers in their first 3 years at the church, achieving a 10-win streak at the Colosseum would directly raise your noble rank by 1 tier. I did the math instantly. If I won 10 straight at the Colosseum for 1 rank increase, and then took first place at the combat tournament for another rank increase, my rank would jump 2 full tiers. That would put me at Marquis, the same rank as Sacred Heart. I told Sophia I had always been interested in the Colosseum and just never had time before. She gave me a slightly exasperated look. She obviously knew about the incident with Sacred Heart that had happened there, but she did not bring it up. She simply agreed and said fighting magical beasts would also be excellent training for both of us. We headed to the Colosseum together. When we arrived, the manager recognized me immediately. I was the kid who had gotten into a fight with the Saintess and beaten her badly right here in this building. He had heard about my forging tournament results and my bronze bracket championship. He considered me a promising young talent. Despite the trouble I had caused last time, his impression of me was actually positive, so he did not give us any difficulty. He asked whether we were here to compete or watch. I thanked him for his help during the previous incident and told him we were here to compete. I asked about the rules. He explained that the format was simple. Fight a magical beast. Kill it, and you win. The beast's strength would be matched to the challenger's level. But first, I needed to take a level assessment. He pointed to a large testing stone nearby. I walked over and placed my hand on it, channeling a small amount of magic power into the surface. A faint white glow appeared, and then a number materialized in front of everyone. 27. The manager froze. Sophia froze. I could practically hear her brain short-circuiting. She had expected me to be around level 17 or 18. She had assumed my forging excellence came purely from talent, not raw power. But level 27 was absurd for a newcomer. That number should not exist among first-year students. It was completely outside the normal range. Now she was connecting the dots. My forging ability was not just talent. My ridiculous level was part of the equation too. Higher stats meant better control, more stamina, greater precision. Everything fed into everything else. The manager recovered from his surprise faster than Sophia did. He was a professional, after all. He had seen plenty of strong fighters come through these doors. But even he had to admit that a newcomer at level 27 was exceptional. I asked him what tier of beast my first fight would involve. Based on my level, a second-tier magical beast seemed like the appropriate match. Second-tier beasts were dangerous creatures that could kill careless fighters easily. But with my current stats and abilities, I was confident I could handle one. My passive lightning body enhancement was running constantly now, and I could stack the active version on top of it for short bursts of overwhelming power. The real question was not whether I could win one fight. It was whether I could win 10 in a row. A 10-win streak meant 10 consecutive battles against increasingly difficult opponents. The beasts would get stronger as the streak continued. By fight 7 or 8, I would probably be facing creatures that matched or exceeded my own level. By fight 10, I might be up against something genuinely terrifying. But that was exactly the kind of challenge I needed. The combat tournament was coming up, and I had almost no real fighting experience. My training consisted of sword swings and technique practice, but I had never fought a prolonged battle against a deadly opponent who was actively trying to kill me. Sparring with other students did not count. Magical beasts fought with pure instinct and zero hesitation. They would not hold back or follow tournament rules. Every fight would be a life-or-death situation with genuine stakes. Sophia seemed to be thinking along similar lines. She had combat experience that I lacked, and this trip was clearly designed to fix that gap. The Pope wanted me battle-tested before the tournament, not just strong on paper. I looked at the arena entrance. Behind those gates, beasts were waiting. Creatures bred and captured specifically to test the strength of the church's warriors. Some had been responsible for killing dozens of students over the years. The survival rate at this academy was horrifying, and the Colosseum was one of the reasons why. Mistakes here were paid for in blood. But standing at the entrance, I felt no fear, only anticipation. My body was humming with lightning energy, my stats were climbing daily, and I had a hammer technique that had just broken through to the next level. I was not the same person who had walked through these doors weeks ago and stumbled into a confrontation with Sacreheart. I was stronger now, and after today, I would be stronger still. That was the only direction that mattered. Forward and upward, no matter what stood in the way. 10 wins would come. The rank increase would come. And eventually, so would everything else I had been working toward since the day I arrived at this academy with nothing but a strange talent and a determination to survive. I turned to the manager and nodded. We were ready to begin. The manager told me he would arrange a second-tier beast for my first fight and to wait in the rest area. He said future matches would be scheduled a day or two in advance, with someone sent to my house to notify me. Sophia and I headed to the public rest area. Since neither of us had any reputation here yet, we were in the common waiting room with a bunch of other competitors. I caught Sophia glancing at me repeatedly with the corner of her eye. She was clearly struggling to process how someone with such high forging talent could also be this strong in combat. She was over 3 years older than me and only level 46. That was considered excellent, even borderline top tier for her age. But I had reached level 27 in just 2 months at the academy. Give me 3 more years, and the gap would be terrifying. She was finally starting to understand why the Pope had assigned her to watch me. My existence did not make sense for someone with a supposed C-rank talent. Then I noticed something shift in her eyes. A new kind of calculation. She was looking at me differently now, with warmth that had not been there before. I read it instantly. She had figured out that my future was practically guaranteed. At minimum, I would become a cardinal. If she could win my heart, her own path through life would become much easier. I saw right through her. After spending this much time together, I knew Sophia was not the sweet girl she pretended to be. She was ambitious, opportunistic, and relentless about climbing higher. She would use every tool available to get what she wanted. An ordinary man would be wrapped around her finger within weeks. But she was dealing with me, and my past had made me far colder than she could imagine. I was good at reading people. If she actually tried to manipulate me romantically, her ending would be worse than she expected. She put on a concerned voice and asked if I was nervous. I was not nervous at all, but I could see what she was doing, so I played along. She cheered me on with a cute fist pump gesture, telling me I was strong enough to crush any beast easily. Her little performance did nothing for me, but it worked beautifully on everyone else in the room. Several men were already sneaking glances at her, completely charmed. One of them, a fellow Viscount, walked straight over to us. He struck what he probably thought was a dashing pose. He introduced himself as Price Antoine, flashed his Viscount badge, and extended his hand towards Sophia, asking to get acquainted. Under normal circumstances, Sophia would have politely declined. She was picky about who she associated with. Someone at this level was not worth her time. But today, with me sitting right next to her, she changed tactics. She acted flustered and helpless, looking to me for rescue. Classic move, designed to trigger a man's protective instinct. I stood up, exactly as she wanted. I told him she was not interested and asked him to leave. He looked me over, noticed how young I was, and seemed briefly surprised. He probably knew better than to mess with a young prodigy. But then he looked at Sophia's face again, swallowed hard, and let his hormones override his judgment. He asked me who I thought I was, standing in his way. The atmosphere in the room shifted immediately. He had calculated that no matter how talented I was too young to be a real threat. My level was probably low. He figured he could bully me now and leave the academy in 2 years before I ever got strong enough to retaliate. Sophia wore a worried expression on the surface. Underneath, she was thrilled. She was about to get a show. He started repeating his insult, but before he could finish the sentence, I kicked him square in the chest. The impact sent him flying across the room. His back slammed into the wall, and he crumpled to the floor. He sat there motionless, head down, completely still. The room went quiet. People were scared. Price had a decent reputation here, a 3-win streak at the Colosseum. And I had just knocked him out cold with a single kick. Or possibly killed him. He was not moving at all. After about 15 seconds, he coughed twice and slowly raised his head. The pain in his chest was clearly agonizing. He had at least 3 broken ribs from that one blow. He tried to stand and say something, but instead vomited a mouthful of blood onto the floor. He stared at the blood in disbelief. He was level 41. Even caught off guard, his body should have been far tougher than a normal person's. How could a kid this young generate that kind of force with a casual kick? He said later it felt less like being kicked by a person and more like being trampled by an elephant. I walked toward him. He was still standing there, frozen. I was not worried about consequences. Sophia would clean this up. The whole incident started because of her, and if the Pope found out I had gotten into trouble because of her scheming, she might get replaced. She would make sure this disappeared quietly. That was the one useful thing about having the Pope's spy by my side. She had strong motivation to keep me out of trouble, even when she was the one creating it. Sophia grabbed my arm and pulled me back, telling me to calm down and that the guy had learned his lesson. I pretended to cool off, but the truth was I had never been angry in the first place. I was just playing along with her little game. She had made her move, and now I wanted to see what she would do next. Think of it as entertainment to spice up my daily routine. I told Price that Sophia had saved his life today, and that next time he saw us, he should walk the other way. He did not say a word. He clearly had no desire to experience another kick like that one. We sat back down together. Price stayed on the floor, playing dead, too scared to move. Sophia was actually happy about what had just happened. In her mind, my reaction proved that I cared about her. Why else would I get so heated on her behalf? She was thinking that with just a little more effort, she could have me wrapped around her finger completely. She had no idea how wrong she was. Soon a staff member came to find me. My match was ready. I stood up and followed him out of the rest area. Price finally dragged himself upright after I left. He was determined to watch my fight. He wanted to understand how a kid could nearly kill him with a single casual kick. He had convinced himself that I must be close to level 40 with some kind of strength-based talent. He also believed that if he had not been caught off guard, he could probably beat me in a fair fight. His injuries were the only reason he was not pushing for a rematch. That was what he told himself anyway. The staff led me to one of the smaller arenas. The main coliseum had one massive central stage, but surrounding it were numerous smaller fighting pits for lower-profile matches. Mine was in one of these side arenas, with a thin scattering of spectators sitting around the edges. I scanned my surroundings quickly, then focused forward. Sophia had followed to watch, and I noticed Price had found himself a corner seat too. Price was still trying to figure out my level. Based on the power of my kick, he estimated I was close to 40 with a strength-type talent. He could not imagine any other explanation for how much damage I had done to his body. Then my opponent entered the arena, and Price's entire theory collapsed. The beast they released was a second-tier savage black boar. That meant my level was in the 20s. The realization hit him like a second kick to the chest. The kid who had nearly killed him was not even level 30. He was not some hidden high-level fighter. He was just a 20-something newcomer with freakish power. Price wanted to scream. A few spectators were looking at me with interest, though not because of my age or level. It was my appearance. The thunder summoning technique had been refining my body daily in subtle ways. My charm stat was now at 83. Tall, well-proportioned, broad shoulders tapering to a narrow waist, pale skin, and absurdly long legs. The overall effect was apparently quite striking. Several people in the stands were staring and whispering. I ignored all of it. When I saw the savage black boar, I kept my expression serious. I knew without question that this beast was no match for me, but I refused to let that knowledge make me careless. A lion uses its full strength even when hunting a rabbit. This was a life-or-death arena, not a training exercise. Overconfidence killed people. I had one life, and I was not going to lose it to something as stupid as underestimating an opponent. But then something unexpected happened. The moment the boar locked eyes with me, it went completely still. The creature that had been thrashing and snorting with rage just seconds before suddenly calmed down. It started backing away slowly, its eyes fixed on me with something that looked unmistakably like fear. The crowd murmured in confusion. One person said the boar looked scared. Another argued that was impossible, suggesting maybe it just was not hungry. A third pointed out that these arena beasts were deliberately starved to the edge of madness before fights. Hunger was not the issue. Price and Sophia were both stunned. They had never seen anything like this. A single look from a human making a magical beast freeze with terror was not normal behavior, but it made perfect sense to me. Animals had survival instincts. The boar was smart enough to sense that I was a predator far beyond its ability to handle. No matter how hungry it was, its body was telling it to run. Pigs were actually very intelligent creatures. This one had correctly assessed the situation and chosen not to provoke me. The referee noticed what was happening, but did not stop the match. He seemed as confused as everyone else, but rules were rules. The fight would continue until one side won. Since the boar was not going to come to me, I went to it. I charged forward. The boar let out a terrified shriek, trying to scare me off with the sound. It did not work. I was not the kind of person who flinched at noise. I closed the distance in seconds. When I reached the boar, I drew my sword and swung once. A single clean horizontal slash. The 2-meter-long savage black boar, bones and all, was split perfectly in half. Blood sprayed across the arena floor. The entire venue went silent. That was it. One hit. Instant kill. A second-tier magical beast had tough outer hide that ordinary weapons could barely scratch. And I had just sliced through the whole thing like cutting paper. At my level, in my 20s, this should have been impossible. But my stats were far beyond what my level suggested, and my sword technique was leagues ahead of anyone my age. Raw numbers combined with refined skill created something that had no answer at this tier. The silence lasted several seconds before the referee found his voice. He announced my victory and advancement. I sheathed my sword and walked toward the exit without looking back. The Colosseum operated as a business. They needed to make money, which meant they would not let a strong fighter burn through all 10 matches in a single day. Their strategy was to identify powerful competitors, package them as star attractions, promote them, and use their fights to draw paying crowds. One devastating performance was exactly what they wanted for marketing purposes. I understood the system. They would schedule my next fight in a day or two, giving them time to spread the word about the newcomer who split a boar in half with one swing. That suited me fine. I had training to do between matches anyway. Every day my stats were climbing from the Thunder summoning breakthrough, and I still had Thunder Spirit pills to use during practice sessions. By the time my 10th fight came around, I would be even stronger than I was today. Price sat in his corner, staring at the blood-soaked arena floor. He had watched a kid in his 20s do something that most fighters in their 40s could not. Whatever excuses he had been building in his head about surprise attacks and unfair advantages had just been demolished. I was simply stronger. There was no arguing with what he had just seen. Sophia met me at the exit with wide eyes and a carefully constructed smile. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, recalculating my value upward yet again. I smiled back at her, letting her think whatever she wanted. As long as she was useful and the Pope kept feeding me resources through her, I was content to let this little game continue. When I came out of the arena, Sophia was looking at me with genuine admiration this time. Before, her interest had been calculated. Now there was something real mixed in. She had seen me split a beast in half with one swing, and that kind of raw power apparently triggered something deeper in her. She was the type of woman who was naturally drawn to strength. This only made her more determined to win me over, not just for a comfortable future anymore, but because she was actually starting to develop feelings. She asked if I had someone I liked. The question caught me off guard. Julia's face flashed through my mind. She had been a light in my darkest moment. I felt gratitude toward her, maybe a little warmth, but I would not call it love. It was hard to separate genuine affection from simple thankfulness when someone saved you at your lowest point. Sophia noticed me spacing out and immediately regretted asking. She could tell I was thinking about someone. That complicated her plans. Teenage boys could be fiercely loyal to their first feelings. But she was not discouraged. She figured she could handle a little competition. In her mind, no distant memory could stand against a present, persistent, beautiful woman working her charm up close every single day. She asked what I was doing next. I told her I was heading to the blacksmith guild to forge. She lit up and said she was going there too. I did not turn her down. I wanted to observe her next moves. Meanwhile, the Pope had already heard about everything that happened at the Colosseum. His shadow agent reported the incident with Price and also flagged Sophia's behavior. The shadow suggested replacing her since she appeared to be manipulating my emotions. The Pope considered it, and something sad crossed his face. He seemed to remember something painful from his own past. Then he decided to leave things alone. He said I would have to deal with matters of the heart eventually. If I got hurt and recovered from it, the experience would make me stronger. If I fell hard, even that would not necessarily be a bad thing. He told the shadow to keep watching and report anything unusual, then dismissed him. So the Pope was going to let Sophia play her games with me. Interesting. He was treating this as part of my education. I did not know about this conversation at the time, but I probably would have agreed with his reasoning. Emotional pain was just another kind of training. At the guild, I went straight into the forging room and attempted my first hero-grade weapon. The materials were rare and expensive, but my privileges covered the cost easily. I locked myself in for 22 straight hours. When I finally emerged, I had created a hero-grade sword refined 6 times. It was a single-handed blade with serrated teeth running along one edge, almost like a shark-tooth sword. The lightning attribute gave it a distinctive color scheme. I named it Thunder Fong because the jagged edge looked exactly like a row of teeth. The effects were incredible. For anyone below level 50, it amplified lightning damage by 50%. On top of that, every strike carried bleeding and paralysis effects. 6 refinements was not a huge number for hero grade, but the enchantment properties were exceptional. A 50% damage boost was far above what most hero-grade weapons could offer. I spent additional time crafting a proper sheath for it. When I walked out carrying Thunder Fong, Sophia was waiting in the lobby. She had apparently sat there the entire time. The moment she saw me, she jumped up and asked how it went. I did not answer with words. I just drew the blade. The violent pulse of magic energy radiating from Thunder Fong told her everything she needed to know. Her eyes went wide with excitement. She asked what it was called. I told her the name and sheathed it again. Over the following days, I went to the Colosseum almost every day. By the 8th day, I had racked up 7 consecutive victories. My winning streak, combined with my appearance, had gotten me promoted to the main arena. They were seating audiences specifically to watch my fights now. The Colosseum had turned me into one of their star attractions, filling the stands with fans who came just for me. Sophia accompanied me every single day. She was always there before my fights, always waiting after. Her persistence was impressive, even if I knew exactly what she was doing. During this stretch, my stats exploded again. Strength gained 17, Agility 13, Constitution 16, Spirit 11. My current stats read: Strength 119, Agility 93, Constitution 116, Spirit 100. I had broken the 100 mark on 2 attributes and was approaching it on the others. My sword technique finally reached level 3 as well, Proficient Mastery. Both my hammer and sword skills were now at the same tier. At this point, my physical capabilities were comparable to a humanoid magical beast. Actually, my raw stats exceeded most beasts at my level by a significant margin. My body was growing faster than my magic power could keep up with, which was a strange problem to have. But even with that imbalance, if I fought Quinn right now, I was not sure he could beat me. That thought was both exciting and sobering. Quinn was my teacher, and yet the gap between us was shrinking at an alarming rate. Today was my 8th visit to the Colosseum. Because I was a first-year newcomer trying to complete the 10-win streak for a rank promotion, the rules dictated that each successive opponent had to be stronger than the last. My first fight had been a second-tier boar that I killed in one swing. The difficulty had been increasing steadily since then. Fights 5, 6, and 7 had actually required me to work for the win. Nothing dangerous yet, but the beasts were getting tougher and smarter. Fights 8, 9, and 10 would be the real tests. The beasts at this stage would be matched closer to my actual combat ability. The Colosseum system was designed to push challengers to their absolute limit by the final fight. The 10-win streak was not meant to be easy. Plenty of talented fighters had failed at fight 9 or 10 and had to start over. I was not worried, though. My stats were climbing every single day. By fight 10, I would be measurably stronger than I was today. Time was on my side in a way it was not for anyone else. Every delay between matches meant more attribute points, more refined technique, more control over my lightning body enhancement. The longer the Colosseum took to schedule my fights, the worse it would be for whatever beast they put in front of me. I gripped Thunder Fong's handle and walked toward the main arena entrance. The crowd noise was already building inside. Somewhere beyond those gates, my 8th opponent was waiting. Time to add another win to the streak. The manager briefed me on the rules. Since I had 7 straight wins, my 8th fight would feature 2 third-tier magical beasts instead of 1. The difficulty was ramping up. I headed to the rest area and looked through the glass at the main arena. It was packed. While waiting, I watched the fighter before me, a second-year student with what looked like an A-rank elemental control talent. He was a water element warrior facing two wolf-type beasts for his fourth win. He immediately created a water armor around his body, which was the standard move for element controllers. It boosted defense significantly, but burned through magic power fast. I always thought that technique was decent but wasteful for low-level fighters. The two wolves attacked with real coordination. One would engage while the other struck from behind. The element warrior managed to stab one wolf through the eye, but ultimately the pressure of fighting two opponents overwhelmed him. The referee had to pull him out. Watching this, I took mental notes. Two opponents meant double the attack frequency, and the moment you dealt with one, the other would strike. On top of that, these wolves were higher level than their challengers. Another fighter went up after him. He faced four beasts, lost without surprise. Then it was my turn. The crowd erupted the moment I stepped onto the main stage. I had apparently built a real following here. Part of it was my appearance. Charm at 83 did its work, but mostly it was my fighting style. Every previous opponent had been cut clean in half with a single strike. People came to see that raw, overwhelming dominance. My opponents were two magic wolves. I drew Thunder Fang. The instant the blade cleared the sheath, my whole presence shifted. The air around me turned dangerous, but the wolves were too starved to care about instincts. They charged me, wanting nothing but to tear me apart. I stood completely still. It probably looked like I was frozen with fear. But the moment the first wolf reached me, I swung Thunder Fang horizontally. The blade tore through flesh and bone effortlessly. The wolf was split in two mid-charge, dead instantly. The second wolf lunged at the same moment. Its claws were inches from my body, but my left hand was faster. I grabbed its head. Just a slight squeeze and my fingers sank into the flesh and muscle of its skull through sheer force. I yelled and ripped its head clean off its body. Blood sprayed everywhere. I tossed the severed wolf head aside like garbage and walked toward the exit without looking back. The arena went completely silent for several seconds. Then the crowd lost their minds. They started chanting for another fight. What they had just witnessed was beyond anything normal. I had killed one wolf with my sword and torn the other's head off with my bare hand. A beast that was 10 levels above me. No weapon, no technique, just raw strength. The manager came rushing over, asking what happened. The referee told him everything. When he heard that I had ripped a wolf's skull off barehanded, his eyes went wide. He could barely process the information. Back in the rest area, I checked the calendar. 14 days until the newcomer combat tournament. At my current pace, I would complete the 10-win streak before then and upgrade my rank to Earl. Everything was on schedule. On the other side of things, Sacred Heart had also decided to enter the newcomer tournament. To her, it was the fastest way to get her hands on me in a legitimate setting. She was apparently thrilled that in just 14 days, she would have an official excuse to fight me. She was still burning for revenge. Meanwhile, the shadow agent reported to the Pope about my day. The Pope listened and then asked a question that surprised even the shadow. Had I taken a single day off since arriving? The shadow agent told the Pope that I had not taken a single day off since arriving. He said that whenever I had even a minute with nothing to do, I seemed to fall into a state of anxiety. He believed it was connected to my past. The Pope had apparently conducted a full investigation into my background and discovered everything about my childhood. He felt sympathy, but recognized that those painful experiences had forged my willpower. His real concern was whether my mind had become twisted, whether my disciplined, well-behaved exterior was just a mask hiding something darker underneath. He thought it was very possible. What kind of teenager was this relentlessly driven without some psychological damage fueling it? He was considering arranging counseling for me. After all, a future pope could not be someone with a broken mind. What he did not know was that I had already been healing. Meeting Wisha on my journey to the church, finding Quinn and the others after I arrived, and having Milia in my daily life. All of these people had quietly mended the wounds inside me. I was not as damaged as he feared. That night, I heard a notification I had not gotten in a long time. One lifespan point added. That was the first time in ages. It was past midnight, but I had no intention of sleeping. After my spirit and constitution both crossed 100 points, my recovery speed and energy levels had become inhuman. I only needed 2 or 3 hours of sleep to feel completely refreshed. But I did not want to burn myself out, so I decided to give myself 1 day each week with 6 full hours of sleep. Those extra few hours were more than enough for a body like mine. The next morning, the Colosseum sent someone to my door. For once, I was up before Milia and answered the door myself. The worker told me my fight schedule had changed. I would be the final match of the day, the headline act. He also handed me my rewards for the 8th consecutive win. 8,000 points plus a red heart stone. The red heart stone could slightly improve physical constitution if worn regularly. The effect was too small to matter for me, so I decided to give it away. To Sophia, who had been hanging around me constantly. Absolutely not. I already knew exactly who I wanted to have it. I strung the stone into a necklace. It was beautiful, vivid color, crystal clear texture, perfect as a gift. I hung it on the kitchen wall where Milia would see it the moment she walked in. Then I went back to training. Basic daily practice was non-negotiable. Milia woke up shortly after. I checked the sky. It was around 4:30 in the morning, sun not even up yet. She stayed up past midnight every night preparing my late meals, and knowing her personality, she spent her days doing housework and cooking without a single lazy moment. She was probably working harder than I was. I made a mental note to give her more rest time going forward. Servants had no rights in this world, but I refused to treat the people around me like slaves. She stumbled out of her room, washed up, and headed straight to the kitchen. She pushed the door open and I watched from across the room. She paused for a second when she saw the necklace hanging on the wall. Then she seemed to think about it, concluded it must belong to me, decided it was not her business, and went straight to work without touching it. I kept training while monitoring the kitchen. Did she seriously not realize the necklace was for her? Maybe she just had not looked closely enough. She would figure it out eventually. An hour passed. I finished training and walked into the kitchen. Milia was happily preparing food, humming a little tune. She had not noticed me standing behind her. I made some noise to get her attention. She spun around, saw me, and immediately said breakfast was ready and she would bring it out. I looked past her at the necklace still hanging untouched on the wall. She cooked facing that direction. She would have seen it every time she looked up. Had she noticed it and just assumed it was not meant for her? I asked her directly. Had she seen the necklace? Milia stared at me, confused. She asked if I was the one who put the necklace there. I told her I bought it yesterday, but it did not suit me, so I was giving it to her. She froze completely. She repeated my words back to me like she could not believe them. When I confirmed it, tears started rolling down her face before she could stop them. I was caught off guard. I could tell she was overwhelmed, but I still asked if she did not like the gift. She shook her head quickly and said nobody had ever been this kind to her before. I walked over and patted her head. I told her not to cry over good things. She wiped her eyes and nodded. I told her I was hungry and asked if breakfast was ready. She snapped back into action immediately, setting everything out on the table. While I ate, she kept glancing at the necklace and smiling to herself. She prepared snacks for me too. Dried monster meat she had fried herself, some fruit juice. All homemade. She clearly treasured the necklace not because of its value, but because it came from me. I adjusted my plans for the day. Since I was scheduled as the final act at the Colosseum tonight, I had time in the morning. If I trained first, there would not be enough time for a full forging session afterward. But training all day would drain too much magic power before a fight. So forging first made more sense. I headed to the guild. What I did not know was that Rien had been stalking me. He had been tracking my daily routine for days and knew exactly which roads I took and when. He was waiting on my usual path that afternoon, expecting me to pass by. His plan was simple. By now I should have finished the drug pills he gave me. With several days since the last dose, the mild addiction should have me at my most uncomfortable. He planned to show up, compliment my recent achievements, and offer more pills. I would be desperate enough to take them. But luck was on my side. Because I went to the forge first and changed my schedule, I never walked past his ambush point. He waited and waited. I never appeared. He started getting suspicious. Maybe I had taken a different route. Maybe someone had warned me. His mind immediately went to York, who had recently submitted a resignation letter. Rien had not approved it yet, even though York had already left the guild. If anyone had betrayed the Alchemist Guild and tipped me off, York was the most likely suspect. Rien eventually figured out that I was headlining at the Colosseum tonight, which explained why my routine had shifted. He rushed over to the arena and decided to wait there instead. His new plan was to catch me after my fight, praise my performance, and hand over fresh pills. He hid in the VIP lounge to avoid making the encounter look too obvious. I finished forging in the afternoon. Since it was just practice, I made magic-grade weapons with no more than 6 refinements each. My efficiency had improved again. I left the finished pieces at the guild for sale and headed to the Colosseum. In my private restroom, I trained while waiting. Not a single second wasted. Occasionally, I glanced at other fighters competing on the main stage, but none of them impressed me much. Training time always flew by. A staff member appeared. 30 minutes until my fight. I wiped off my sweat, sat down cross-legged, and began regulating my breathing. When the time came, I walked out onto the main stage. The crowd exploded. My name echoed through the arena from every direction. People were screaming for me to tear my opponents apart. Even Rien, watching from the VIP section, was startled by the intensity. He knew I was famous, but this was his first time witnessing my popularity in person. Then my opponents emerged. For Magic Wolves, each at level 29, 10 levels above me. 4 of them at once. I narrowed my eyes. Just as I expected, the 9th round had doubled the difficulty from the 8th. For coordinated predators, all stronger than me on paper. But honestly, even facing 4 wolves above my level, I felt completely relaxed. My stats were so far beyond what my level suggested that these creatures were not the threat the Colosseum thought they were. The real question on my mind was what the 10th fight would look like. The final challenge for the 10-win streak. I had a feeling it would not be straightforward. Every round so far had escalated predictably. The 10th would probably break that pattern somehow. But that was tomorrow's problem. Right now, 4 wolves were snarling at me from across the arena, and thousands of people were watching. The wolves fanned out, already coordinating. Wolf-type beasts were intelligent pack hunters. They would not charge blindly like the boar from my first fight. They would probe, surround, and strike from multiple angles simultaneously. Good. That was exactly the kind of pressure I needed before the newcomer tournament. Sacred Heart would be there in 14 days, along with every other talented first-year student. Real combat experience against coordinated opponents was far more valuable than any amount of solo training. These wolves were doing me a favor by being smart. I drew Thunderfang. Lightning crackled along the serrated edge. The wolves hesitated for just a fraction of a second when they felt the energy radiating from the blade. Smart animals. They could sense danger. But hunger and arena conditioning overrode their survival instincts, and all 4 charged. I activated my lightning body enhancement on top of my passive layer. My attributes doubled from an already superhuman baseline. The world seemed to slow down slightly as my perception sharpened. 4 wolves, for trajectories, for sets of claws and teeth coming at me from different angles. I moved forward to meet them. Not backward, not sideways. Straight into the pack. The crowd noise faded into background static. All I could hear was my own heartbeat and the pounding of 8 wolf paws against the arena floor. This was what I had been training for. Not the forging, not the politics, not the careful games with Sophia and the Pope. This moment, blade in hand, enemies closing in, nothing between survival and death except my own strength and skill. Thunder Fong hummed in my grip. The first wolf lunged. I swung. The 4 wolves were locked behind gates on the other side of the arena. Through the gaps in the bars, I could see them drooling, already imagining tearing me apart. The referee confirmed I was ready and announced the start. The gates lifted. All 4 wolves charged at me simultaneously. I kept my expression serious, though not because I was worried. These wolves were so starved that they had abandoned any pack coordination. Their formation was chaotic and sloppy. I had already calculated exactly how to take each one down. The first wolf reached me in a blink. I drew Thunderfang, and a flash of purple light cut through the air. The moment the wolf opened its jaws wide, I thrust the blade straight into its mouth. The tip punched out through the back of its skull. I yanked the sword free, and the body collapsed. Wolves 2 and 3 came at me from opposite sides. I shifted my feet slightly, almost like a dance step, and dodged both attacks with an elegance that surprised even me. Then I brought Thunderfang down in a single slash and cut the second wolf clean in half at the waist. Its front and back legs kept twitching separately on the ground. The 4th wolf was still closing in. I did not wait. I threw Thunderfang like a javelin. The entire blade buried itself in the wolf's skull. Its supposedly tough bone crumbled like paper against the force of impact. That left one wolf standing. It froze, confused. 3 of its packmates had dropped in what felt like a single heartbeat, but I was already in front of it. I grabbed a fistful of fur and slammed it face first into the stone floor. The arena surface was reinforced with a magic circle specifically to prevent damage, which meant the impact on the wolf's body was devastating. It let out a pitiful whimper. I grabbed its head and twisted. The neck snapped. Then I ripped the head clean off with my bare hands, just like last time. The crowd had been waiting for exactly this moment. The stands erupted into absolute chaos. Screaming, cheering, people losing their minds. 4 higher-level wolves, and I had not taken a single scratch. I pulled Thunder Fong from the dead wolf's skull, wiped it, and walked toward the exit without looking back. What I did not know was that Rien had been watching every second from the VIP section. He had come to the Colosseum specifically to intercept me with more drugged pills. Seeing my fight in person clearly shook him. He had heard I was a strong fighter, but witnessing it firsthand was something else entirely. I could tell later from how he acted that my performance had genuinely frightened him. He hesitated. A voice in his head asked whether continuing his plan was wise. If it failed and I grew to full strength, the consequences for him would be catastrophic. But his arrogance won out quickly. He told himself that as long as the plan succeeded now, there would be no future to worry about. He appeared in the main hall just as I was leaving. I heard his voice behind me and turned around. I kept my face completely calm and greeted him with a smile. I told him what a coincidence it was to see him here. He gave some excuse about watching a juniors match and said he had caught my performance. Then he steered the conversation exactly where I expected. He asked about the pills he had given me last time. Were they helpful? Did I like the effects? This was the moment I had prepared for. I let my voice carry just a hint of eagerness. I told him the effects were excellent and asked if they were available for purchase somewhere. I made sure my tone sounded slightly desperate, like someone who had tasted something addictive and wanted more. It worked perfectly. I could see the satisfaction flash across his face. He believed I was hooked. The slight urgency in my voice confirmed everything he wanted to hear. He had originally planned to scan me with magic power to check my physical condition and verify the drug's effects. But after watching my fight, he abandoned that idea. He knew that fighters with combat instincts as sharp as mine could detect magical probing instantly. If I caught him scanning me, his entire scheme would be exposed. The risk was not worth it. So he took my act at face value. He pulled out 3 bottles of the same pills and offered them to me casually. He said they were extras that meant nothing to someone of his level. I might as well have them. I let excitement flood my face. I made my breathing heavier, my eyes wider. I thanked him profusely and told him that if he ever needed help with anything, he should come to me. I even held myself back from reaching for the bottles immediately, as if my manners were barely restraining my craving. He loved every second of it. His lips curled into a subtle smirk as he handed the bottles over. I could practically see the gears turning in his head. He was already thinking beyond the original plan. If I was this dependent on his pills, maybe he could use me for other things too. Stealing secrets from the blacksmith guild, perhaps. Feeding him insider information. A talented young addict under his control would be an incredibly useful tool. After thanking him again, I took 1 pill out right in front of him and put it in my mouth. It dissolved instantly and flowed into my body. Then I excused myself, saying I needed to go train immediately. I left quickly, as if I could not wait to feel the drug's effects during practice. The moment I got home, I started training. But not because the pill was driving me to. York had already told me that 1 or 2 pills, even 5 or 6, would cause no harm whatsoever. In small quantities, they actually did help with cultivation. The danger was only in consuming entire bottles over time, which would build the addiction to an uncontrollable level. So the pill I swallowed was genuinely useful. I just had no intention of ever taking enough to become dependent. Rien thought he was slowly poisoning me. In reality, I was accepting free training supplements from a man who wanted me dead, using his own weapon against him in tiny, harmless doses. The irony was almost funny. The most powerful alchemist in the church was hand-delivering premium cultivation aids to the person he was trying to destroy, and that person was getting stronger from every single pill. Every bottle he gave me was money out of his pocket and power into my body. I finished my evening training session and checked my progress. The pill had indeed boosted my cultivation speed slightly. Combined with my daily attribute gains from the Thunder Summoning Breakthrough, the effect was noticeable. My stats were climbing steadily. 9 wins down after today. 1 more victory, and my noble rank would rise to Earl. The newcomer tournament was less than 2 weeks away. Sacred Heart was out there somewhere, sharpening her claws and counting down the days until she could fight me in an official setting. Let her count. Let Rien plot. Let Sophia scheme. I had Thunder Fong on my hip, lightning in my veins, and a body that grew stronger every single day without fail. Whatever came next, I would face it the same way I faced those 4 wolves tonight. Head on. No hesitation. No mercy. I spent 3 hours digesting the pill's effects. When I checked my stats afterward, I was stunned. Just one pill had pushed me to level 30 and raised all 4 attributes by about 4 points each. Rien's skills as an alchemist were genuinely incredible. If you could ignore the addictive side effects, this drug was basically a miracle medicine for someone at my stage. No wonder he was confident his plan would work. I sealed the remaining pills away. Technically, I could safely take a few more, but there was no need right now. I also wanted to get my body checked at some point to make sure nothing was wrong. Rien had played it safe with the dosage, which actually worked in my favor. More importantly, I could not afford to raise my level any higher before tonight. The Colosseum matched opponents based on your current level. Every point mattered. I had also been holding off on using the training resources I bought earlier for the same reason. Save them until after the 10-win streak. The next morning, the Colosseum worker arrived early again. I opened the door myself. He handed me my 9th win rewards, 10,000 points and a rare or used for hero-grade weapon forging. Then he told me about tonight's final challenge. I would face 1 mutant beast 15 levels above me, plus 4 regular beasts 10 levels above me. All at once. That hit differently. I remembered the mutant goblin warrior I had fought before. Just a goblin, but after mutation, its power had been terrifying. A mutant beast of a higher species would be far worse. The exact threat depended on the degree of mutation, but this was clearly a massive step up from yesterday. At level 30, my opponents tonight would be 1 level 45 mutant and 4 level 40 beasts. Yesterday at 29, I had faced 4 level 39 wolves. 1 level difference, but the difficulty had skyrocketed. Still, I was not panicking. Thunder Fong was a hero-grade weapon. It could pierce through 4th-tier beast defenses easily, even 5th tier if needed. My real advantage was firepower, not durability. As long as I could hit them, they would go down. I adjusted my plans. No forging today. Instead of going to the guild, I stayed home and trained lightly. The goal was not to exhaust myself, but to get my body into peak condition for tonight. Low intensity, high focus, saving every drop of energy. News of my 9-win streak had spread everywhere. Shaga, Winnie, and Gato all wanted to come watch my 10th fight. But when they saw the ticket prices, they could not afford them. So they planned to wait outside the arena for results. Quinn and several others who were close to me also planned to attend. They had already secured seats in the stands. My enemies had heard the news too. Sacred Heart smashed her room apart again when she learned my rank was about to rise. Then she calmed herself down and came to watch. Her obsession with me had reached an absurd level. Rien was there as well. Every one of my enemies expected me to win. That was the strange thing about my reputation now. Even the people who hated me believed I was unbeatable. The earlier matches were unremarkable. Win some, lose some, nothing exciting. The crowd was half asleep watching contestants get rescued by referees one after another. When I finally arrived at the Colosseum, I ran into Shaga and her group outside. They had come to cheer me on despite not being able to get in. Without hesitating, I brought them inside with me. I told them that going forward, if they ever needed help, they should just ask. No need to be so timid around me. Of course, I could not help with anything truly unreasonable, but within normal bounds, I would always be there. All 3 of them lowered their heads shyly and mumbled agreement. This was their first time inside the Colosseum. The luxurious environment clearly overwhelmed them. They were afraid of doing anything wrong. The manager spotted me and rushed over with a warm greeting. He could not believe how quickly the kid who had beaten up the Saints had grown into the arena's biggest star. I told him these were my friends and that I was taking them to my private restroom. He glanced at Shaga and the others, instantly recognizing them as nervous newcomers, but did not object. The manager's eyes lit up with an idea. He pulled out 3 annual passes and gave them to Shaga and her group, saying they could come to the Colosseum anytime for free. The 3 of them looked at me, unsure whether to accept. I told them to just take it. The manager was trying to build a relationship with me, and since he had genuinely helped me before, I did not mind. His name was Eugene Kenneth, one of the Colosseum's directors. When Shagao realized that the friendly man who had just handed them free passes was actually a senior executive, she went quiet. All three of them became even more stiff around me. They were measuring the gap between us again. If I won tonight, I would become an earl. The difference in our social standings would be enormous. I brought them to my private restroom. It was spacious with a massive glass window overlooking the entire arena. They stood frozen like baby chicks, afraid to touch anything. I told them to relax and started preparing for my fight. Staff brought in fruit and refreshments, which only made the three of them more overwhelmed. Half an hour before my match, I drank a magic recovery potion and cleaned myself up. From inside the tunnel, I could already hear the crowd chanting my name. The feeling of being a star was honestly pretty enjoyable. When I stepped onto the arena floor, the audience went wild. But I kept my eyes fixed on the opposite side. 5 massive wolves waited behind the gates. 4 of them were giant gray wolves, over 4 meters long, solid gray fur, powerful by normal beast standards. The bigger the body, the stronger the beast, and these things earned the word giant in their name. But the 5th wolf was something else entirely. Over 5.5 meters long, covered in gray fur streaked with black-red stripes, and glowing crimson eyes. I recognized the species immediately. A hell demon wolf, a mutant evolution of the giant gray wolf. Beyond having superior strength and speed compared to its base species, the hell demon wolf excelled at magical attacks. It could launch fireballs with strong corrosive properties, and its massive body meant an enormous magic power reserve. This was a seriously dangerous creature. My expression hardened. This fight required absolute focus. The referee announced the start. The gates opened. But unlike previous opponents, these wolves did not mindlessly charge at me. They formed up around the hell demon wolf and advanced at a steady, controlled pace. The leader was directing them. This pack would attack with coordination and strategy. That changed things. I could not wait for them to set up their formation. I had to strike first. I adjusted my stance and charged straight at them. Shaga covered her eyes from the viewing room. The size difference alone looked hopeless. 5 enormous wolves against 1 human. As I closed the distance, the hell demon wolf opened its jaws and formed a black fireball. It launched it directly at me. I did not dodge. Instead, I swung Thunder Fong to test the fireball's power. My timing was precise. The blade met the fireball at the exact moment of impact and split it cleanly in half. The 2 halves blazed past me on either side, so close I could feel the searing heat against my skin. Where the black flames touched the stone floor, they kept burning for several seconds before fading. Parts of my outer clothing were scorched away. After feeling that heat up close, I made my assessment. Those black fireballs were no joke. The corrosive flames could cause serious damage even through indirect contact. Going forward, I needed to dodge them entirely rather than trying to cut through them. Testing was done. Now the real fight would begin. I charged forward. The hell demon wolf watched me cut through its fireball and seemed surprised that a human could actually handle its attack. But it immediately escalated. Black light began radiating from its body, and a magic circle appeared above its head. It was casting something far more powerful. Fire rain. I recognized the danger instantly. If that spell completed, I would be fighting under a barrage of corrosive fireballs falling from the sky. I needed to end this before that happened. Taking damage was completely unacceptable to me. I activated my lightning body enhancement, and my speed exploded. I became a bolt of lightning crossing the arena in a flash. The 4 giant gray wolves rushed at me like they had lost their minds. Despite their enormous bodies, they were shockingly fast. That was the terrifying thing about this species. They had no fancy abilities, no elemental attacks, no special tricks, just claws and teeth. But the fact that they dominated other beasts with nothing but basic physical weapons proved that their raw stats were pushed to the absolute limit. Maximum speed, maximum strength, maximum defense. The simplest toolkit combined with the purest numbers. In a way, they were the same type of fighter as me. I swung Thunder Fong at the closest wolf and carved a massive chunk of flesh from its body. But unlike the smaller beasts I had fought before, this thing was too large to kill in one hit, and its pain tolerance was almost non-existent. Even with a wound deep enough to show bone, it did not flinch. It kept attacking with the same ferocity as before. These creatures barely felt pain at all, which made them relentless in combat. Normal beasts would never dare fight something this savage. The wounded wolf lunged at me with its jaws wide open. I used the same technique that had worked before. I thrust Thunder Fong straight into its mouth, through its throat, and out the other side. That should have been an instant kill. But this monster, even with a sword through its neck, managed to stagger away from me before finally collapsing several steps later. And Thunder Fong was stuck in its mouth, carried away with the body. I was now unarmed against 4 remaining giant predators. Winnie and the others watching from my rest room turned pale with fear. But I was about to show the entire arena what a true stat monster could do with nothing but bare hands. The second wolf charged and opened its massive jaws to bite me. I shot both hands forward and grabbed one tooth from the upper jaw and one from the lower jaw. Then I held its mouth open with raw strength. The wolf pushed with everything it had. Its jaw muscles strained and trembled. It could not close its mouth against my grip, not even by a centimeter. The other 2 wolves were closing in fast. I had seconds, so I did something that made the entire arena lose their collective minds. I swung the wolf I was holding by its teeth and hurled its entire 4-meter body through the air. It crashed directly into one of the incoming wolves, sending both tumbling across the stone floor. And the 2 teeth I had been gripping came out of the jaw completely, ripped free by the force of the throw. I looked at the teeth in my hands. Each one was roughly the size of a dagger, wickedly sharp and surprisingly sturdy. They would work perfectly as improvised weapons. The last standing wolf rushed me. I leaped onto its neck, mounted it, and drove both teeth straight down into its eyes. The wolf's world went red. It did not fear pain, but losing its vision was something else entirely. It went berserk, thrashing and biting at everything around it blindly. The other 2 wolves were nearby, just getting back on their feet. The blinded wolf sank its fangs into one of its own packmates, tearing a chunk from its neck. I had turned their own member into a weapon against them. The audience could barely process what they had just seen. Their brains were asking their eyes for confirmation. Did that human really just pick up a 4-meter wolf and throw it like a toy? Yes, that really happened. The crowd noise reached a deafening peak. The roar of thousands of voices actually affected the beasts inside the arena. The blinded wolf especially could not handle the sensory overload. It kept attacking everything around it in a panic, unable to distinguish friend from foe. The hell demon wolf watched all of this with cold, emotionless eyes. It showed no concern for the suffering of its subordinates. The fire rain spell was now complete. A massive magic circle appeared in the sky above the arena. Countless black fireballs began raining down from above. After casting the spell, the hell demon wolf visibly weakened. Its eyes dimmed and its posture sagged. This attack had cost it heavily in magic power. I watched the fire fall with a calm expression. Then I sprinted toward the 3 badly wounded wolves that were still alive. I reached the blinded one first and kicked its front leg. The bone snapped on impact. The wolf lost its balance and crashed to the ground. I grabbed its body and lifted it above me just as a black fireball struck it from above. The wolf's fur ignited instantly. Its body became a burning shield over my head. Another fireball hit the ground nearby and exploded on contact. With the giant wolf as cover, I absorbed the blast without taking direct damage. My living shield was being consumed at an alarming rate, but it held long enough. The other 2 wounded wolves tried to dodge the falling fireballs, but the barrage was too dense and too fast. Within seconds, both were torn apart by explosions and corrosive flames. Their bodies became unrecognizable masses of scorched flesh. The wolf above me was losing its life force rapidly. Fire was eating through its body at a terrifying speed. I needed my weapon back. I spotted Thunder Fong's handle protruding from the first wolf's corpse, which had also been badly burned by the fire rain. I dropped what remained of my shield and sprinted for it. The hell demon wolf watched me run with cold calculation. Even if I retrieved my weapon, so what? Fire rain had 3 full waves. I had survived the first one using its own wolves as shields. But with all 4 subordinates now dead or dying, I would have nothing to hide behind for waves 2 and 3. That was what it was thinking. It believed the math was still in its favor. 2 more waves of devastating fire against 1 human with no cover. Simple arithmetic. The beast was confident, but it had made one critical miscalculation. It was judging me by the standards of normal fighters at my level. It had watched me fight its wolves and categorized my abilities. Strong, fast, resourceful, dangerous, but manageable at range with overwhelming magical firepower. What it did not understand was that my stats were not normal. My attributes did not belong to someone at level 30. They belonged to someone far, far beyond that threshold. And Thunder Fang was not a weapon that matched my level either. It was a hero-grade blade that could cut through defenses 2 full tiers above my rank. The Hell Demon Wolf had used its most powerful attack and exhausted most of its magic power in the process. It was weakened, drained, and standing on the opposite side of an arena from someone who could cross that distance in the time it took to blink. Someone who had just demonstrated the ability to throw a 4-meter wolf through the air with his bare hands. The math was not in its favor. It just did not know that yet. I ripped Thunder Fang from the charred wolf corpse. The handle was scorching hot, but only turned my palms slightly red. Nothing serious. I flicked the blade once and sent a current of lightning through it, cooling the metal back to normal temperature instantly. Then I locked my eyes on the Hell Demon Wolf. During the Fire Rain spell, the beast could not move or attack separately. That was its vulnerability. I charged straight at it while the second wave of fireballs began falling from the sky. These things had killed the giant gray wolves in a single wave, so their destructive power was no joke. Black fireballs rained down around me as I sprinted across the arena. Most of them I dodged with pure speed. The few I could not avoid, I cut in half with Thunder Fang as they fell. The distance between us was shrinking fast. The Hell Demon Wolf watched me punch through its fire barrage, and something shifted in its crimson eyes. It realized the fire rain was useless against me, so it stood up and canceled the remaining spell entirely, choosing to fight me head-on instead. Just because this creature leaned toward magic did not mean its close combat was weak. A bone-shaking roar erupted from its throat, and hellfire ignited across its entire body. It looked exactly like a demon crawling out of the underworld. The heat radiating from its burning fur was intense enough to warp the air around it. I did not hesitate. I closed the remaining distance and swung Thunder Fang at its face. The blade carved off a chunk of flesh from its jaw, exposing white bone and teeth underneath. The wound made the monster look even more terrifying than before. It barely registered the pain. Its massive claw lashed out at me with blinding speed, trailing black light through the air. I brought Thunder Fang up just in time. Claw met blade with a metallic crash that rang across the arena. Its claws were as hard as hero-grade weapons. On top of the physical attacks, the hellfire coating its body was constantly draining my stamina. The extreme heat sapped my energy with every second I stayed close. But I refused to back away. We fell into a brutal, primitive exchange of blows. No fancy footwork, no evasive maneuvers. Just two fighters standing toe-to-toe, meeting every attack with a direct counter. Block and strike. Block and strike. The audience was screaming non-stop at the sheer violence of it. Up in the VIP section, Sacreheart was watching with a deep frown. I could not see her face, but I knew she was there. My performance was making her uneasy. She could not understand how I had grown this much this fast. That confusion was feeding her anxiety about our upcoming fight at the newcomer tournament. Good. Let her worry. On the surface, the battle looked evenly matched. But anyone paying close attention would notice the truth. The Hell Demon Wolf's attacks were ferocious and relentless, yet none of them were landing clean hits on me. The only real damage I was taking came from the ambient heat of its hellfire, a slow area of effect burn that I could manage. Every single direct attack was blocked or deflected by Thunder Fang. Meanwhile, every one of my strikes was drawing blood. Each swing of my blade opened a new wound on the beast's body. Black blood was pooling on the stone floor beneath us, spreading wider with every exchange. My Thunderclap sword technique at level 3 gave me extraordinary control over my blade. Combined with my high spirit stat, I could read the wolf's attack patterns almost perfectly. I saw where every claw swipe was aimed before it arrived. Our raw stats were roughly comparable, but in terms of technique and combat awareness, I was crushing it completely. There were simply no weaknesses to exploit in my fighting style. High attributes across the board plus refined technique in both sword and body created something that had no obvious counter at this level. The Hell Demon Wolf was powerful, but it was a beast fighting on instinct. I was a human fighting with precision, calculation, and intent behind every movement. Because the wolf could barely feel pain, it did not notice what was happening to its own body. Blood loss was accumulating. Its movements were gradually slowing down. The attacks that had been blindingly fast at the start of our exchange were now just slightly sluggish. Most fighters would not have caught the difference. I caught it immediately. The moment its right claw lifted for another swipe, I spotted my opening. The joint was exposed for a fraction of a second. I drove Thunder Fong into the gap between the bones at the elbow and sliced clean through. The blade separated flesh and found the seam in the skeletal structure, splitting the entire foreleg in two. The Hell Demon Wolf's eyes widened with disbelief for one instant. Then its massive body tilted and crashed to the ground. It struggled desperately to stand back up, but a wave of dizziness from the catastrophic blood loss hit its brain. Its remaining legs scrambled against the stone, but could not find purchase. I struck immediately. Thunder Fong plunged into the side of its neck. Then I dragged the blade sideways, opening a gash that nearly severed the throat entirely. A torrent of black blood erupted from the wound, spraying across the arena floor in a dark fountain. I jumped backward instantly. Even dying, the beast's body was still attacking on pure instinct. Its remaining claws scraped at the air where I had been standing. Its burning crimson eyes stayed locked on me, filled with murderous hatred, as if it wanted to devour me even in death. I was not taking any chances. I stepped forward one final time and thrust Thunder Fong through its ear canal. The blade punched straight through its brain and emerged from the opposite ear. The Hell Demon Wolf finally went still. I pulled my sword free and looked toward the VIP section. The glass was opaque from the arena's side, but I knew Sacreheart was watching. She knew that I knew. We stared at each other through the barrier, separated by glass and 12 days. At the newcomer tournament, she planned to make me pay. I planned to show her exactly how wide the gap between us had become. I left the arena. Behind me, the crowd refused to quiet down. They had just witnessed history. I was only the 9th person in the Coliseum's existence to achieve a 10-win streak as a first-year student. Every previous person who had accomplished this feat had possessed an S-rank talent and had been immediately granted Marquis rank upon entering the academy. The Coliseum's rank advancement system only applied to those at Viscount level or below, meaning the maximum achievable rank through this path was Earl. Going higher required 50 consecutive wins, which was virtually impossible for anyone except the absolute strongest S-rank holders. Eugene was waiting in my restroom when I returned. He congratulated me and said that starting today, I should be addressed as Earl Clan. My results would be reported to the church administration, and my official Earl badge would be granted tomorrow. I nodded. Shaga, Winnie, and Gato were standing behind Eugene with expressions somewhere between awe and terror. They had watched everything through the glass window. The blood, the fire, the raw brutality of the fight. This was a side of me they had never seen before. But they were still here, still my friends, still waiting to congratulate me despite the growing distance between our worlds. I looked at them and felt something warm beneath the exhaustion. These connections mattered. Not because they made me stronger, but because they reminded me that strength without people to protect was just violence with no purpose. I had plenty of violence in me already. What I needed was more reasons to keep it pointed in the right direction. Tomorrow I would receive my Earl badge. In 12 days, Sacreheart would come for me at the tournament. And somewhere out there, Rien was still plotting, Sophia was still scheming, and the Pope was still watching from the shadows. The game was getting more complicated every day, but my path remained simple. Train, forge, fight, grow. Everything else would sort itself out as long as I kept moving forward. Eugene asked if I planned to keep fighting at the Coliseum. The battles were approaching life-or-death intensity, which actually made them excellent training. I told him I would come back roughly once every 10 days, but only after the newcomer combat tournament was over. He agreed immediately, clearly thrilled that his star attraction was not retiring. I left the Coliseum with Shaga and her group. They kept looking back at the building like they could not believe what they had just experienced. I understood the feeling. Their world and mine were separating rapidly. But before we parted ways, I had something for them. I pulled out 3 magic-grade weapons I had forged personally. A spear for Shaga, and weapons suited to Winnie and Gato. I told them these should significantly boost their combat power and that I wanted them to perform well at the upcoming tournament. Shaga tried to refuse, saying the gifts were too valuable. But her eyes never left the spear. The moment she held it, I could see the connection form instantly. The weight, the balance, the feel in her hands. It was like the weapon had been made specifically for her. Because it had been. I had crafted each one with their fighting styles in mind. I told them to just take the weapons and consider it an investment. They could repay me later. All three nodded earnestly. They were so honest and straightforward that I almost laughed. They seemed like the type who would be easy to trick. Fortunately for them, I was on their side. I reached over and patted Winnie on the head. I asked if she had been eating properly. She shook her head quickly and said she had been eating fine but had not been drinking blood, which was why she was not gaining weight. As a vampire, skipping blood consumption was not just a dietary choice. It would eventually shorten her lifespan. She knew this. I could tell she was struggling with it internally. After we parted ways that night, she apparently decided to start drinking blood again. She was finally ready to face that part of herself. Gato and Shaga went home to train. Everyone had their own battles to fight. Mine was at the forge. But this time I was not making weapons. I needed armor. The newcomer tournament was 12 days away, and I had been fighting in regular clothes this entire time. Against the Colosseum beasts, raw stats and Thunder Fong had been enough. Against talented human opponents who could think and adapt, proper protection would matter. I also started thinking about getting a mount. My official class was Knight, and over 100 chapters into my story, I still did not have one. That felt wrong. But my growth speed created a unique problem. If I raised a young beast as a mount, it would never keep up with how fast I was leveling. Unless I somehow got my hands on a dragon or something equally powerful at the top tier, any mount I chose now would just be a temporary solution. After thinking it over, I decided to find an adult magical beast first. Something already grown and combat-ready that I could ride while practicing mounted combat. Once I had enough money and status, I could look into getting a dragon. For now, practical was better than perfect. The next day, I went to receive my Earl badge. The ceremony went smoothly. The Pope himself conducted the ceremony. He stood before me, placed the badge on my chest, and congratulated me. He told me I would eventually get everything I wanted. I thanked him and meant it. My feelings toward the Pope were shifting. Every time we interacted, his sincerity seemed genuine. He really did act like an elder who wanted nothing more than to see a younger generation succeed. I could not tell if it was real or if he was simply the greatest actor I had ever met. Either way, the help he had given me was concrete and measurable. Better food, secret protection, opportunities to grow. If our paths ever diverged in the future, I would give him one chance before treating him as an enemy. He had earned at least that much. After the ceremony, I headed straight to the Blacksmith Guild. When the smiths there saw the Earl badge on my chest, the shock was visible on every face. Most of them had no idea I had been fighting at the Colosseum. They only knew me as a forging prodigy, not a combat monster. The badge forced them to reconsider everything they thought they knew about me. Dick happened to be at the guild that day. He stared at my Earl badge, then looked down at his own identical badge. His face twisted through several emotions in rapid succession. He could not accept that a teenager he had challenged to a 3-year bet was already standing at the same noble rank as him. He demanded to know how I had become an earl. I shrugged and told him it just sort of happened. Before he could explode further, I walked past him toward the forging room. Our 3-year agreement was looking increasingly one-sided. At this rate, I would not need 3 months, let alone 3 years, before I could handle him completely. I spent the next stretch of time crafting armor. Since I had never forged protective equipment before, I did not attempt hero grade. Instead, I built a complete magic-grade armor set with 10 refinements. The craftsmanship took everything I had learned and applied it to a completely different type of forging. Weapons were about concentrating force into a single edge or point. Armor was about distributing impact across surfaces while maintaining mobility. The finished suit was silver-white with intricate lightning patterns engraved across every plate. I designed it with a sleek, form-fitting profile rather than the bulky style most knights preferred. This made it look more elegant and allowed much greater freedom of movement during combat. Underneath the metal plates, I lined everything with high-quality soft beast hide so the armor would not chafe or restrict my skin. Comfort mattered during long fights. After the main chest piece, I forged a matching helmet, combat boots, bracers, and a reinforced belt. Each piece complemented the others in both function and appearance. I also purchased a necklace enchanted with lightning attribute amplification to round out the ensemble. The complete set gave me defensive capabilities I had never had before, while maintaining the speed and agility that defined my fighting style. The lightning engravings were not just decorative either. They channeled my natural lightning energy throughout the armor, creating a subtle defensive field that would weaken incoming attacks before they even reached the metal surface.